It was supposed to be the sweetest part of the night. Pumpkin pie, fresh out of the oven, the kind of dessert that smells like every cozy Thanksgiving memory you've ever seen in a movie. The whipped cream sat in a glass bowl waiting to be spooned on top. Candles flickered. Forks clinked against china. And then my mother leaned back in her chair, her eyes fixed on me, and said, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather, "Helen was a mistake." I swear I felt the air leave the room. The sound of laughter around the table cracked like glass. My aunt gave a tiny cough. My cousin pretended to adjust his napkin, and my father suddenly became very interested in refilling his wine glass. Everyone knew they had just witnessed a grenade roll across the table, but instead of diving for cover, they tried to laugh it off like maybe, just maybe, she didn't mean what we all knew she meant. I sat there, fork in hand, the piece of pie untouched. The smell of cinnamon and nutmeg turned sour in my nose. My chest was tight, my skin burning hot, but I forced myself not to flinch. My mother's voice, smooth, even amused, carried through the silence.
I mean, she wasn't planned. We hadn't expected her, and sometimes I think, well, if she hadn't come along, my life might have looked very different.
There it was. Not just the word mistake, but the dagger behind it. And for a heartbeat, I was 13 years old again, sitting at this same table praying no one would notice me, praying she wouldn't say something cruel in front of everyone. But this time I wasn't 13. I was 34. I lived in New York, paid my own bills, built a life without her fingerprints all over it. Yet somehow, here in this dining room, under the glow of chandeliers and the weight of family eyes, she could still reduce me to the little girl begging to be loved. The silence stretched. Someone laughed too loudly, trying to ease the tension. My father muttered something about her just joking, but his eyes never met mine. My brother David shifted uncomfortably, cutting another bite of pie he clearly didn't want. And me? I stared at the crumbs on my plate, waiting for the room to steady, for the sting behind my eyes to dry before a single tear could betray me. What's strange is how ordinary everything else seemed. The pie was still warm, the whipped cream melting just a little around the edges. The silverware gleamed. My niece asked her mom for a smaller fork. Around me, life kept moving, like the world hadn't just split open beneath my chair, but I heard her words echoing, louder and louder. Helen was a mistake. Sometimes I wish she'd never been born. It wasn't the first time she'd said things that cut deep. Growing up, I collected insults like bruises, invisible to everyone but me. Too dramatic, too heavy, too sensitive. I learned to swallow them, tuck them away, and keep smiling. But this was different. This wasn't a jab disguised as advice or a comparison dressed up as a joke. This was my existence, my entire life, reduced to an inconvenience she wished she'd avoided. And here's what I remember most. No one stopped her. Not then, not in that moment. The people who loved me, who claimed to care, they froze. Their silence said it all. This is just how she is. This is how it's always been. But inside me, something shifted. Instead of collapsing under her words, a fire lit. It was small, flickering, but it was mine. I looked around the table, saw the half smiles, the uncomfortable coughs, the desperate attempts to pretend nothing had happened, and I knew this night would mark the line between before and after. Because in that instant, I realized she had just handed me the truth she'd been holding back for years. And as cruel as it was also freeing. For decades, I'd wondered if maybe I wasn't enough. If maybe, if I tried harder, I could earn her love. But hearing her say it, that I was never wanted, was like a key turning in a lock. I sat back, the fork finally slipping from my fingers, and let the silence settle. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought the others must hear it. My mother smirked, satisfied. like she'd scored the final point in a game she always had to win. But she didn't realize she'd just lost the only power she ever held over me. And in that moment, I made a decision. Not to cry. Not to shrink. Not to beg for someone else to smooth it over. I would respond, but not the way she expected. Not with rage, not with tears. I would give her something she couldn't twist, couldn't laugh off. Something that would echo long after the pumpkin pie was gone. That night, at that table, over the clatter of cutlery and the hum of nervous laughter, I knew the story of my life with her had changed. Her words were a bombshell, yes, but they also cracked open a doorway. And once I stepped through, there would be no going back. Pumpkin pie has a way of sticking to the air, sweet and buttery with that thin seam of cinnamon that clings to your throat. The night my mother called me a mistake, the fork was still warm in my hand. I heard the sentence, felt the table sway, and watched the tiny ripple in my coffee cup, like a tremor running under the china. You already know that moment. It's the hinge the door swings on. But a door only slams if the frame is there. The frame, for me, was built years before, on a quiet cul-de-sac in New Jersey, behind hedges trimmed as square as shoeboxes. Our house looked like it had studied for the test and aced it. White siding scrubbed by a man who came every spring with a long brush and a coil of hose. A porch with clean railings, a brass bell polished to a soft glow. Hydrangeas the size of cabbages, the blue kind that makes neighbors ask about soil pH like it's a secret code. We had a flag on July 4th, electric reindeer in December, geraniums in a terracotta line May through September. The lawn was chlorophyll bragging, and the driveway didn't dare show a crack. On paper, we were that family, the kind you point to and think, they've got it figured out. Inside, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and a rule book. My mother moved through rooms like a conductor, baton invisible, everything on cue. The oven light was always clean. You could check your lipstick in it. Towels aligned with the mathematical conviction of graph paper. The refrigerator held not milk and oranges, but our itinerary. Color-coded, magnetized, laminated, piano at 4, reading log due Friday, the birthday card we would send to a cousin we rarely saw. Efficiency had a heartbeat in that kitchen, and if you listened, you could hear it. Tick, tick, tick. Our wall clock like a metronome training us to be smaller between the beats. My father learned quiet the way some men learn golf. He could pluck silence out of the air and drape it over his shoulders. In the evenings, he sat with the newspaper, not really reading, eyes sliding like skaters across the headlines. He worked downtown, in tax, in something with forms and a lot of small numbers that never spilled. My mother would tell people he was meticulous, and he would smile the way you smile when someone compliments your shoes. He loved me in the careful way of men who don't want to make trouble. A hand on my shoulder as he passed, a murmur at the doorway, "Listen to your mother." Love as cauterization. Love that doesn't bleed. If you'd knocked on our door on a Sunday, you'd have heard the sound of a blender, church clothes squeaking, my mother's voice moving through the house in smooth loops. "Helen, stand straight, chin up." She believed in posture the way other people believe in prayer. I learned early that a spine could tell a lie. Chin high enough and nobody asks if you're hurting. When my hair wouldn't cooperate, cowlick fighting the part, she'd pinch the comb through it with the tight, efficient motions of someone zippering up a suitcase. "There," she'd say, stepping back. "Presentable." And that word clung to me like a name tag I hadn't chosen. In our town, women swapped jam recipes and reputations in the same breath. My mother never swore, but she could salt a sentence with a sigh that did the same work. If a neighbor's child brought home a B, she'd press her lips together in a delicate pity that tasted like peppermint. Some kids just aren't disciplined. The pause did all the heavy lifting. I used to think she floated above the ground, Later, I understood it was just that she walked only where the floor was polished. I remember the sound of the dishwasher at night, plates talking to each other under a muffled rain. I remember watching the house settle, the little groans wood makes when it remembers it's a tree. In the dark, details loosened. The perfect drapes looked less militant. The photos on the mantel, me in a gingham dress, my mother's hand anchored on my shoulder, the invisible weight of it, became tiny, flat explanations trying to sell a story I couldn't fully buy. I would lie in bed with the taste of toothpaste and envy the way dust could dance in a shaft of light and not get told to stop. School was my rehearsal space for being acceptable. I ironed my smile every morning. I learned to hand teachers what they liked to see. Bullet points, neat margins, a girl who could answer but wouldn't raise her hand too high. At open house, my mother shook the principal's hand like they were co-authoring my future. "Helen is very bright," he said. "Of course," she replied, and I felt the leash of that word click around my neck. Bright is a performance. You can fail bright if you slouch. We had a piano in the living room, black as a verdict. When I practiced, my mother sat at the edge of the sofa with a pencil poised over my sheet music, tapping a tiny, precise correction when my tempo wandered. "Again," she'd say, not unkindly, not kindly either, just efficiently. The song returned to the start, like a dog that knows its route. I got good. Good enough to play the Albright recital in 8th grade, good enough to be told I was talented by people whose eyes skimmed my face like a headline. The applause felt like rain hitting a sealed window, sound without soak. You might wonder where I hid. Brookside Park had a pond with 3 disgruntled ducks. I'd sit on the cold bench with a book I wasn't reading and count the ripples until my chest loosened its fist. At the corner deli, Mr. Parisi wrapped turkey slices in white paper and called everyone kiddo, no edges. On summer mornings, I'd ride my bike past houses with the hushed windows and picture the families inside, all of them obeying the weather forecast of a single person's mood. Sometimes I imagined the hedges sighing when the sprinklers shut off, the landscape tired of pretending. I'm telling you this not to ask for sympathy, but to explain the math. People think big moments arrive fully grown. They don't. They are built out of tiny screws and little hinges and the everyday weight of a hand pressing down on your smallness. When my mother called me a mistake, it didn't come as a shock to my bones. They'd been learning that language for years. "Careful," she'd say when I reached for the good glasses. "Don't try that hairstyle. It's not for your face shape. Maybe save that story for someone who will find it interesting." Each sentence was a sanding block. She believed she was polishing. What she made was shine and silence. My father's part was easier to memorize. He stood exactly in the doorway between me and my mother and never stepped forward. If you asked him today, he'd say he wanted peace. Peace is not the same thing as safety. Peace at any cost charges interest. When I came home with an award, the kind they print on stiff paper and pretend is gold, he patted the air near my shoulder and said, "You make us proud," like the sentence had a timer and would explode if held too long. My mother nodded. "Well," she added, "imagine what you could do if you really applied yourself." Praise with a clause attached is a paper airplane. It lifts, then sinks. Saturday mornings were chore parades. My job was to dust the bookshelves, spines arranged by height because narrative is less important than symmetry. I'd run the cloth along our history and feel the grit gather in the fabric. If I missed a spot, my mother didn't raise her voice. She raised her eyebrows. Disappointment was her mother tongue. You can learn to translate anything if you hear it enough. I began to hear "I love you" as "I love what you could be if you stop being so you." There were good moments, and it would be dishonest not to say that. A summer night with the sound of crickets fat in the air, My mother letting me lick the beaters after she made frosting. The two of us laughing when powdered sugar poofed like smoke. A winter afternoon, my father teaching me how to balance a checkbook, the columns lining up, the pleasure of knowing where every penny had gone. But even those memories have a seam. The joke followed by the adjustment, the lesson followed by the rule. It's not that we were unhappy all the time. It's that happiness had to clock in and out and wear the correct uniform. So when you picture that pie, the custard gleam, the neat wedge on a plate that matched the other plates, understand that it was never just dessert. It was the altar where we sacrificed anything messy. It was the proof of our competence. My mother loved competence like other people love music. She curated us. Anyone who didn't cooperate with the exhibit got a placard. Problem to be fixed. I learned to edit myself the way she edited the family Christmas letter. A paragraph on achievements, a tasteful joke, nothing that would make anyone ask questions. By the time I left for New York, I could feel the curtain when I touched the air. It was heavy and velvet, and it kept the drafts out. It also kept the weather from being real. In Brooklyn, noise was honest. Sirens didn't apologize. People argued on sidewalks and made up with coffee and bagels. I love that. I loved that a cracked sidewalk could still hold a tree. But even then, on the phone, my mother's voice could slide under the door. Are you eating? Are you saving? Are you being sensible? She never asked if I was happy. Or maybe she did, and I learned to hear it as something else. This is the part of the story where nothing dramatic happens. No plates thrown, no doors slammed. Just the soft sanding of a life until a person fits a shape someone else drew. I fit it well. Until the night I didn't. Until pumpkin pie and a sentence spoken like weather. And the realization that the frame I'd lived inside was only strong because I had held it up. Pumpkin pie was supposed to taste like holidays. Nutmeg, cinnamon, warm sugar, and it did. Until the night my mother called me a mistake. The word slid across the table like a dropped knife. It nicked everything on its way down. The china, the candlelight, the memory of every other Thanksgiving where I'd smiled too hard and swallowed too fast. People say words can't hurt you. They haven't had their mother say them with a laugh. That laugh opened a trap door under my chair and I fell. Not into the night, but backward, into years of small humiliations that smelled like floor polish and tasted like chalk. I didn't start out invisible. No one does. You learn it the way a house learns the sound of its own pipes, slowly, endlessly, until the rattling feels like silence. In our New Jersey kitchen, the fluorescent tube buzzed, the fridge hummed, and my mother's bracelets clicked as she pointed out what needed fixing. Hair, posture, hemline, voice. Inside voices, Helen. Breathe in your stomach. It's sticking out. Smile. People like a cheerful girl. She'd say girl the way you'd say gum stuck to a shoe. My father would rustle a newspaper, a tiny thunderstorm between us, then fold it again and ask if anyone wanted ice cream. That was his survival skill, vanilla diplomacy. At school, I figured out how to be the type of student teachers loved. Neat handwriting, assignments on time, extra credits stapled at a perfect angle. Gold stars gave me a map of where I existed. The day Miss Keller returned our essays with comments in purple ink, mine said, thoughtful. The David said, brilliant. Brilliant, my mother repeated in the car, tasting the word like a fancy dessert. Do you hear that, Helen? Truly gifted. I held my thoughtful like a participation trophy and watched the trees flip past, the early winter light washing everything in a thin, indifferent gray. David, 2 years younger, wide-eyed, quick with numbers, earned medals that made a cheerful clink when he tossed them on the kitchen counter. Baseball, science fair, something with robots that whirred and spun. My mother stuck his certificates to the fridge with novelty magnets. Mine went in a folder she kept in the junk drawer, the one that smelled like rubber bands and old batteries. "We'll organize these later," she'd say. Later meant never, but carefully. It meant you should be proud quietly. I tried sports once. Soccer in the fall, because that's what girls did to prove they were good sports. The grass stained my socks and the coach's whistle made a thin, slicing sound in my right ear. I was not fast, not fierce, not anything the field wanted. After a game where I spent most of my time chasing the shadow of the ball, my mother pressed a cold water bottle into my palm and said, "You're more of a reader, really." The unspoken half of the sentence was, "And that's okay as long as you don't expect applause." On the drive home, the car smelled like wet turf and disappointment. I rolled the window down just enough to let in air, then up again before she could tell me to fix my hair. When I did well, and I often did, the praise arrived with a condition stapled to it. An A in English? Wonderful! Imagine what you could do if you tried this hard at being sociable. Honor roll, lovely. Now perhaps we can work on your posture. She had a catalog of better versions of me in her head, and each page came with a critique disguised as advice. I learned to accept compliments like hot tea, careful not to spill or wince. There was a mirror at the end of our upstairs hallway, narrow and unforgiving, a ribbon of glass that sliced you from crown to toe. My mother would stand behind me, adjust my shoulders with cool fingertips, and tip my chin the way a portrait photographer would. Chin down, eyes up. See? Nicer already. Remember to soften. Men like softness. I was 12 when she said that. 12. Learning that softness was a performance you put on like lip balm. 12. Learning that my body was a project. Public moments were the hardest. Family parties with bowls of potato salad sweating under plastic wrap. Church basements with folding chairs and paper banners. Someone would ask about school and I'd start to answer, something small, something safe. When my mother's voice, sugar bright, would slide over mine. David just got invited to the gifted program, and Helen is very organized. The ellipsis did the work of 100 unsaid words. People nodded the way you nod at the weather. I'd watch the condensation crawl down my plastic cup and think, I am not the weather. I am not the quiet sky. But I kept my thoughts where they lived, behind my teeth. In 8th grade, the guidance counselor called to discuss high school tracks, academic versus honors versus whatever glittering lane David would later sprint down. Honors English for Helen, certainly, Miss Jones said into the phone, and my mother covered the receiver with her hand. Do you think you can handle it? She mouthed to me. Handle it. As if it were a hot plate. As if I had not been balancing scalding things for years. I nodded, and she relayed it with a laugh. She'll give it a try. A try. The future shrank slightly to make room for her caution. I learned strategy. If an outfit might draw fire, I added a cardigan. If a grade might be questioned, I offered the extra credit first. If a silence arrived at dinner that could be filled with bragging, I asked about the cousins. I could choreograph a conversation to keep myself out of it. Invisibles make excellent stage managers. We know where the trap doors are. There were good moments. I won a poetry contest once, local, with a poem about rain on chain-link fences. The judge, an old man who smelled like mothballs and spearmint, shook my hand and said, "You see things." I carried that sentence home like a lit match cupped in both palms. My mother set the certificate on the kitchen table and said, "Poetry is sweet. Just remember, it doesn't pay the rent in the city." She was not wrong. That was never the point. The point was that the match went out between the toaster and a basket of apples. When David struggled, and he did sometimes in ways he wouldn't give himself permission to say, my mother rebuilt the world around him with pillows. He's tired, she told teachers. He's understimulated, she told coaches. He's hungry, she told me. which meant make him a sandwich. I made the sandwich. I cut it diagonally because the triangles lined up neatly on a plate. He said thanks and meant it, which saved me. I want you to know he was kind. His kindness was not a cape that could pull me from the well, but it was a rope I could hold while I learned to climb. The house where I became quiet held noise beautifully. The dryer thumping sneakers, the garbage truck gasping, the neighbor's dog hurling himself at the fence. On nights my father worked late and my mother arranged herself on the couch with a glass of wine and a show where people made tasteful kitchens from raw concrete, I'd sit on the bottom stair and listen to commercials. It's strange what comforts you, Jingles. The warm glow of other people's certainty. A woman on TV would promise a new life in 30 minutes or less, and my mother would say, "See? That backsplash? That's vision." For fun, I'd imagine a world where someone watched me butter toast and said, "That's vision." I buttered the toast slowly for the practice of it. Report cards came in paper envelopes, and our kitchen had a particular smell on the day we opened them. Lemon cleaner, printer ink, something faintly metallic from the dishwasher. My mother ran a neat nail along the glue, read silently, then nodded or sighed. If she nodded, the house felt lighter for an hour. If she sighed, the air got syrupy and hard to move through. "Math," she'd say, as if the word itself were a diagnosis. I'd say I'd go to tutoring. She'd say, "Yes," and then she'd add, "Maybe set aside the poetry for a while." And the way she said poetry, you'd think it was a lipstick too bright for day. I don't want to make a saint of my father because he wasn't one, but sometimes he would catch me in the garage by the shelves of paint cans and string and say, "You know you're doing fine, right?" I'd say, "Sure." He'd nod like a man thanking a crossing guard. Then he'd ask if the car needed gas. He loved us in practical ways. He filled tanks, he replaced batteries, he drove us to the dentist. I built a small room in myself where I shelved those gestures. On certain nights, I still go there and turn the light on. By high school, my invisibility had a shape. I knew how to ghost through a cafeteria without spilling my tray. I knew which hall to take to avoid the bulletin board where winners' photos lived. I knew that if I laughed too loudly, my mother would say, "Your laugh is a little much." So I perfected a half laugh, a polite exhale that sounded like a page turning. When I brought home a yearbook, she flipped to the page with club photos, found me in the third row, and said, "There you are," like she was spotting a typo. All of this is why pumpkin pie tastes the way it does to me now. When my mother called me a mistake, she wasn't inventing something new. She was putting a label on the box she'd kept me in since I was old enough to pass her the tape. The room went quiet because everyone heard the truth in it. And I went quiet because I had learned to. The difference this time was that the quiet didn't swallow me. It echoed. It told me I was real. It told me I'd been here the whole time, pressed like a leaf between textbook pages, waiting to be unfolded and smoothed flat under someone's careful hand. Mine. Pumpkin pie was cooling on the sideboard when my mother called me a mistake. Those words didn't end at the edge of the table. They traveled through the hallway, down the front steps, out to the curb where the November air bit my cheeks. They followed me onto the train back to the city. They clung to my coat, to the stale heat in the subway car, to the plastic seat I slid into with my suitcase pressed between my knees. I stared at the grimy window and watched my reflection wobble with every tunnel light, and I thought, not for the first time, maybe that's why I ran. I didn't run far geographically, 2 rivers and a skyline away, but New York felt like another planet the first night I arrived for college. My dorm room smelled like new paint and old dust. The radiator hissed like it had secrets. My roommate, a ballerina from Ohio, pinned up fairy lights and told me the key to sleeping through sirens was to turn them into ocean waves in your head. I lay awake and tried. Ocean wave, ambulance, ocean wave, ambulance. Around 3 in the morning, I finally slept. Not because the noise softened, but because I stopped waiting for quiet. In the morning, I bought a bagel bigger than my palm from the corner bodega and burned my tongue on coffee the color of the Hudson at dusk. I walked to class with a map folded in my coat pocket and a new, fragile sense of permission. The city did not notice me. That was its mercy. At home, every move drew commentary. In New York, a girl with chapped lips and a thrift store peacoat could disappear into a river of strangers and feel, for the first time, unobserved. I studied communications because it gave me language for the things I had been negotiating my whole life. Tone, subtext, the choreography of a message. I learned about framing and narrative arcs and the way a single word can tilt a story. I learned that people listen when you lead with the human part, even if you're selling something that comes in a box. Between lectures, I worked the campus phone bank, then a cafe with sticky floors, then an internship where I stapled press kits until my thumbs blistered, and took notes in meetings like my life depended on verbs. When I graduated, New York and I had an understanding. I paid it in rent and attention. It paid me in momentum. The PR firm that hired me had windows that stared right into the throat of Midtown. In the mornings, I rode the elevator with women whose perfume smelled like money and metal. In the evenings, I learned the city by its leftovers. The rhythm of a copy machine at 9 p.m. The way a janitor hums when he thinks no one's around. The warm hum inside my head when a statement finally landed clean. I was good at my job. Not loud good, not the kind that asks for applause. Quiet good, the junior who could fix a sentence without changing its soul. The one who caught the detail everyone else sped past. When a client's campaign wobbled on launch day, my boss slid the brief across my desk and said, "Find the heartbeat." And I did. I found it hiding in a founder story about building something after losing everything. And the campaign turned, like a weather vane finding wind. Brooklyn came next. A third-floor walk-up with a door that stuck in the summer, and a view of a brick wall that bloomed with ivy in June. The first night there, I sat on the floor, among boxes, and ate Chinese food with a plastic fork. Steam fogged the window. A neighbor played trumpet, badly, bravely, with the same 3 notes looping, like they were trying to remember their own melody. I taped a cheap print above the sink that said, "Build the life that lets you breathe." New York taught me how to breathe. It taught me the grammar of sidewalks, the pleasure of anonymity at noon and recognition at midnight. The man at the deli learned my order, egg and cheese on a roll, extra pepper. The woman at the laundromat began tucking a dryer sheet in my folded sweaters like a blessing. A stray cat started sleeping on the hood of my car like it paid the insurance. I bought a small plant and kept it alive through winter. By moving it from the sill to the table and back again, it felt like a miracle, a green thing thriving in my care. And still, the calendar circled its old dates, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter if my mother was feeling pious. The texts began as polite inquiries, "Are you coming home this year?" and hardened into instructions. "We've already told everyone you'll be here." If I hesitated, my father called, voice low, a human buffer. "It would mean a lot to your mother." Which meant it would cost me. Travel became a ritual I could do in my sleep. The night before the drive, I set my alarm for a time that started with a 4. I made a playlist that was more mantra than music. On the highway, I watched the horizon like a promise that didn't belong to anyone. I practiced answers the way you practice lines in a play, light, agreeable, slippery. "How's work?" "Busy, good. Seeing anyone?" "Just focusing on myself." "You should come home more. I'm trying my best." Every visit reset me to factory settings. I would walk through the front door, and the years I'd spent building spine and voice dissolved like sugar in hot tea. My mother's eyes were scales. She weighed everything: my hair, my shoes, the pitch of my hello. She tugged at the hem of my shirt with 2 fingers, like it might transmit a disease. I felt my sentences shrink to fit the space she allowed them. It took me a week, sometimes 2, to get my breath back in New York, to expand again to my actual size. But the city kept giving me reasons to stay brave. At work, I started owning rooms, not with volume, with clarity. I learned that a sentence can be a doorway if you build it right. I learned to say no and watch it hold. My boss put me on a new business pitch, and I built a deck that didn't sound like a deck. It sounded like a person. We won. I went home with a headache and a grin, and fell asleep still in my coat. Weekends softened me. I walked the Brooklyn Heights promenade and let the skyline do what it does. Remind you that your smallness can be a comfort, not a curse. I sat on park benches and watched old men play chess like each move carried grief and grace. I cried at a movie alone and realized no one in the theater cared, which felt like love. I said yes when friends invited me to their weird art shows, and their earnest plays, and their rooftops that weren't actually legal places to stand. I kept showing up until I had a little family of people who weren't my blood but shared my oxygen. Then November. It always comes with the smell of brine and cinnamon. Each year I swore I would do something different: friendsgiving, volunteering, a long, aimless walk with a hot pretzel and no destination. And each year I packed a bag anyway, because history is a powerful magician and guilt is its favorite trick. The city seemed to watch me go with one raised eyebrow. It never tried to stop me. It didn't hold grudges. It just let me return, spent and quiet, and start again. People ask why I kept going back before the last time, the worst time, the pumpkin pie time. Habit, I say. Hope. Sometimes. Not hope that she would change, though maybe a small, foolish corner of me held that candle, but hope that I would be different. That I could sit at that table and not hand over my lungs. That I could keep my voice from slipping away like a ring too big for my finger. The city trained me for that kind of hope. Because every day here is a small resistance to the noise, to the pace, to the temptation to harden into something sharp and unbreakable. I didn't want to be unbreakable. I wanted to be flexible. I wanted to bend where I chose and hold where I must. I wanted to choose myself and mean it. So I built a life that felt like a quiet rebellion. I made dinners that were just for me and lit a candle anyway. I bought fresh flowers from the bodega even when the budget said don't. I took long showers on Sunday nights and let the steam erase the week. On my fridge, I taped a note that said, "You are not obligated to be smaller for anyone." I read it like a prayer before I locked the door each morning. And yet, pumpkin pie cooling, mother at the head of the table. The sentence that left her mouth like it had been sharpening itself on her tongue for years. A mistake. My name hung between us, invisible and heavy. The city couldn't protect me there. My degree couldn't. My job, my rent checks, my friends with spare keys, they all waited for me on the other side of the river. In that moment, there was just me and the girl I had been, standing shoulder to shoulder, deciding if we would run again or stand our ground the next time. When the train pulled into Atlantic Avenue that night, I gripped the pole and made myself a promise. I didn't whisper it. I said it in my head, the way you say your own name when you're learning it again. The escape had brought me here. The city had taught me how to breathe. Now it was going to teach me how to speak. Pumpkin pies steamed between us. Before the whipped cream could sigh and slide, my mother would call me a mistake. I didn't know the exact second yet, only that it would happen at dessert, the way a clock strikes in a house that pretends to be quiet. That moment was waiting, warm and glossy and sharp. People would laugh first, a little, Because laughter is what you use when you don't want to choose a side. I could already feel the varnished table under my palms, the tiny tremor in the spoons. But that was later. First, we had to get through the ritual. She loves a ritual, my mother. If she could iron time, she would. Tonight, the dining room wore her perfection like a fitted dress. The linen was bone white and pressed so flat the light skated on it. Crystal stemware stood in disciplined lines. The silver was so polished it showed me a thinner version of my face. Napkins were folded into little crowns because she never met a symbol she didn't want to stage. Butter sat in a porcelain leaf. Salt and pepper looked like a married couple, porcelain and heavy, never smiling. The chandelier hummed, a chorus of warm bulbs doing their best impression of sun. Place cards. Always place cards. My name, Helen, inked in my mother's perfect hand and parked at the far end near the window where the glass chilled your shoulder. She had stationed me between a neighbor she adores for gossip and a family friend who never remembers my job but remembers my age like it's her favorite statistic. At the head of the table, my mother, queen of the room. My father diagonally across, still and careful, the way a man is careful around a lit candle he's not allowed to touch. David, my younger brother, sat in her orbit, effortlessly. His wife, Emily, floated beside him, finishing my mother's sentences with the speed of a good daughter-in-law. Aunt Rose took the seat closest to me that my mother would allow. Uncle Alan raised his water glass when I looked his way, a small salute that let me breathe. Sage and butter and roasted skin. The turkey breathed that smell over us, and the gravy boat wore a thin halo of steam. Somewhere in the kitchen the oven door sighed. Somewhere in my chest, so did I. I touched the back of my chair before I sat, the wood warm from the heat of the room. The chair creaked once like it recognized me. My mother lifted her chin. "Before we start," she said. She always says it like an opening night. "Let's go around and share what we're thankful for." She let the sentence hang like tinsel. Her bracelets chimed. She adores the chime. It's our tradition. Our tradition. The words were paint. They covered everything that didn't match the picture. We always begin with her. No one says this aloud, but everyone knows the choreography. She placed 2 fingers on the rim of her wineglass, like she might spin it but wouldn't dare, and smiled the smile she uses for cameras and caterers. "I'm thankful for family," she began, light as meringue, "for health, for the roof over our heads, and," she looked toward David, "for watching David step into his future with such grace, and Emily, for the way she keeps us all grounded." Emily's cheeks went pretty with pride. She reached for David's hand. The table rustled with approval. My mother turned her smile toward me the way you turn a lamp to low. "And of course," she said, as if it just occurred to her, "for Helen making the effort to be here tonight." She let the word effort rest where everyone could hear it, a compliment wearing high heels that pinch. When she passed the gratitude baton to my father, he cleared his throat and kept it vague, like he always does when specificity might burn. He thanked the season, the harvest, the friends who joined us, the neighbors who watched packages, the weather for behaving. He thanked the turkey, which was dead and easy to praise. The gratitude moved around the table, a polite current. Emily was thankful for new routines, for a promotion that thrilled my mother more than it thrilled Emily. Uncle Alan was thankful for the Mets finally playing like they meant it, which broke the spell and made everybody laugh. Aunt Rose was thankful for small mercies, good coffee, honest conversations, mornings that didn't hurt. When gratitude reached David, he lifted his glass in that effortless way. He can be casual inside a script. I'm thankful for the work I get to do, he said, and for the people who show up for me. And his eyes grazed the table. My mother swallowed him in a beam. He added, almost as an afterthought, and for my sister, for being here. Soft, sincere. It landed in my lap like a folded blanket, warm and neat. I nodded and kept my eyes on the rim of my plate for a second longer than necessary. My turn. The room became a lens. I could hear the candle's wick speaking in tiny crackles. I could feel the place card edge against my wrist, the ink just slightly raised. There are 2 ways to play this game. You can bring your whole heart into a room that uses hearts as coasters, or you can answer in nouns and verbs and keep your insides inside. I chose a third way. I'm thankful for distance and nearness, I said, for a city that teaches me to keep moving and for the quiet moments that remind me to stop. I let it sit. I smiled at no one and at everyone. I'm thankful for honesty when it shows up. Silence pressed the linen for one breath. Then chairs sighed, forks clinked. My mother laughed softly as if I'd told a private joke she didn't get but wanted credit for. Beautiful, she said, and I could hear the parentheses around it. Platters began their travels. The turkey, carved into fan shapes, came first, then the stuffing, dense with chestnuts. The cranberry sauce shook in its cut glass bowl like a jewel with a pulse. The mashed potatoes sat in a boat so heavy my wrist ached when I lifted it, and I liked the ache. It felt honest. Emily passed me the green beans and said, "Take lots," and I did, because they were blistered and bright and cut the richness in a way the air could not. Conversation braided itself through steam. The neighbor beside me offered weather, then real estate. She asked which subway I take like the city was a maze and I'd been rude not to leave breadcrumbs. Across the table, my mother narrated family updates the way a museum docent narrates a tour. Things in frames, scrubbed of dust. When she mentioned a friend's new grandbaby, her voice sweetened into a tone I recognize in puppies and pearls. The word grandbaby floated like a balloon directly above my head. I didn't reach for the string. The ritual has rules under the rules. Nobody writes them down, we just obey. You laugh in the right places. You fold your napkin into a smaller and smaller square as the night goes on. You pretend the stories are new, even when you could mouth the endings. And underneath it all, you keep score. The table is a scoreboard. Points for the child who marries. Points for the one who decorates according to season. Points for photographs that coordinate. My mother entertains the way generals plan campaigns. She will say we are blessed and mean we are winning. I watched her hands, because they tell the truth sooner than her mouth does. When Emily mentioned a centerpiece tutorial she found online, my mother's knuckles relaxed. When Aunt Rose talked about volunteering at the clinic, the fingers stiffened, then loosened when the topic turned to a gallery opening my mother had attended. When I picked up the gravy boat, she watched the angle of my wrist like I might tilt the world. Heat lifted off the plates in gentle waves. The chandelier hummed louder with the swell of voices. I let the sound wash over me the way you let ocean water lick your ankles. Close enough to feel, far enough not to knock you down. My heartbeat slowed to a pace I could manage. This is how you survive a ritual. You let it be a ritual. You don't argue with a hymn. You find your own harmony underneath it. Let's take a moment, my mother said midway through, raising her glass again, to appreciate tradition. She loves that word. It drapes over her shoulders better than fur. We show up year after year and we remember who we are. Who we are. My fork hesitated. I looked down the length of the table and saw the picture she'd curated. Sparkling glasses, loosened ties, a centerpiece taller than the conversation needed to be. I saw the person she made me in this room, a quiet note at the edge of a symphony that was never written for me. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The ritual kept playing. I want to tell you the room was cruel. It wasn't. It was warm and bright and well-fed. It was full of the kind of laughter you get when people know the script and are relieved there are no surprises, yet it was nice. That's the trap. Niceness is the gift wrap on control. The more beautifully it's tied, the more you hesitate to tear it. Dessert plates waited like moons on the sideboard. I saw the pie out of the corner of my eye, cool enough now to hold its own shape. My mother followed my gaze and smiled. She had perfected that pie, she likes to say. The crust had that bronze that only patience can buy. She will tell you the secret is cold butter. I will tell you the secret is heat. We finished the last bites of the main course, napkins loosened. Someone told a story twice. The neighbor beside me dabbed the corners of her mouth with ceremony. My father stacked plates with careful hands. My mother stood, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the air. "Ready?" she said, and everyone nodded, grateful to be shepherded. She lifted the pie server like a baton, and there it was again, warming the edges of my tongue before I even tasted it. The future approaching in neat slices, the pumpkins pureed and spiced, the silence waiting to be seasoned, the laugh that would come and go. I breathed in and tasted cinnamon and distance. The ritual had done its job. It had set the table. Pumpkin pie was already cooling on the sideboard when my mother called me a mistake. She said it like weather, offhand, breezy, as if naming the season. There was a clink of forks, a nervous laugh from someone who should have known better, and the room tilted just enough for me to notice how steady my hands looked against the linen. But we don't arrive at a hurricane out of nowhere. Storms gather. Pressure builds. Before the pie, before the line that split the night in two, we were still at the table. And she was doing what she does best, cutting without leaving visible blood. It starts small, it always does. The salad plates have barely been cleared when she glances at my arms and says, "You know, sleeves like that are unforgiving under chandelier light." Not a question, not a request, just a judgment disguised as a tip, handed to me like a mint you never asked for. She does not look up to see where it lands. I take a sip of water and taste the metal of the faucet instead of lake cold clarity. The crystal clinks against the ring on my finger, a cheap silver band I bought on Bleecker from a vendor who told me it looked like thunder. The sound is too bright in the hush between courses. The turkey arrives, glossy, bronzed, a magazine cover made edible. David stands to carve because that is the role he learned early, the man with the knife, the helper, the good son. His wife, Hannah, arranges roasted carrots into neat, obedient rows and tells everyone about their new condo with the river view. Mom beams as if she personally shifted the East River for them. "Brooklyn is charming," she says to me on the exhale, as if charming is a pity. "But you must miss being safe." It's said with a smile. A smile is a clever sheath. "I walked to the subway this morning," I say, "and the barista knew my name." "Of course," she says, and turns her mouth toward the platter. "Service people always remember." And she lets the word service hang there, heavy as gravy, like I'm a casual acquaintance to my own life. Forks ferry slices. The knife scratches porcelain as David hits bone. Hannah laughs too loudly at a nothing story about her office Secret Santa. Her laugh is an apology aimed at the woman who invented apologies as currency. "Sweetheart," Mom says, eyes sliding back to me. "Did you bring a dish? I don't recall seeing anything labeled. as if everything I touch requires a warning.
I brought wine.
I say. 2 bottles and a cranberry chutney. Oh, she says, shaping disapproval into a circle of lips. Cranberry chutney. That's very Brooklyn. She repeats the word as if it's a medical condition. Dad clears his throat, which is his favorite sentence. Turkey's good, he offers to the room, to the ceiling, to anyone who might save him from having to stand somewhere with a spine. David slides a slice of breast meat onto my plate. Generous. Kind. I catch his eye, a half-second of apology he can't afford out loud. He returns to carving, to smiling, to making sure the heap on his wife's plate is a little larger than mine. He is practiced at balance, even when the table is tipped. Work's been busy, I offer. The most neutral topic I own. I launched a health campaign last week, citywide. Oh, Mom says again, that round vowel like a pearl she can't quite spit out. So you're still doing spin? She waves her fork in the air as if chasing down a word that keeps outrunning her. Messaging. Public relations, I say. Impact storytelling, hospitals, clinics. It must be nice, she says, to make a living off adjectives. Steeled setter, she stabs a green bean as if to pin it to the truth. David's new project is in real numbers. Imagine. Steel. Concrete. Things you can measure. Outcomes, I say quietly. Lives changed are measurable. But my voice has to travel across her certainty, and certainty is thick. Hannah leans in, a gleam of pity shining like oil. You must be so busy you don't have time to, you know. She twirls her fork. Cook. I cook, I say. I think of my apartment stove with its stubborn pilot light, the pot of pozole that simmered last winter while snow glued itself to the fire escapes, the friends who sat cross-legged on my rug and asked for seconds and then thirds. Heat is not cooking, Mom says, but some people aren't. Culinary, it's nothing to be ashamed of. And she looks directly at me as if checking that I'm tracking my place in the family story. I set my knife down and watch the shine of the blade blink with the chandelier. I made cardamom buns last weekend. Oh, that's charming, she replies again, charming like a pat on the head, but not dinner. Someone asks about Baxter, my mutt with coat colors like spilled espresso. I brighten because he is simple, honest, pure, love that arrives without a story. He learned to paw the cabinet where I keep his treats. Smart little thief. Mom does that coo she saves for babies and malapropisms. Oh, the rescue. How noble. Noble rustles like a costume in a play she finds tedious. Of course, with proper breeding, you'd avoid health surprises. You mean surprises like me? I do not say. I count 5 beats and press my tongue to the back of my teeth the way my therapist taught me, reminding my body where it lives. Dad's knife touches my plate by accident. The sound rings. He recovers with a joke about the Jets that no one laughs at. Not even the cousins who used to idolize them in green face paint. The room is full of tiny salvations that never quite arrive. Are you seeing anyone? Mom's favorite curtain rises, and the script is always the same. You know, someone serious? I'm seeing myself, I say, smiling to show it's not a fight. I like her, Hannah giggles. A New York answer if I ever heard one. Men your age want stability, Mom says. They want not chaos. And the pause is her blade. A home-cooked meal. A woman who is home. I am home, I say. I give her the gift of eye contact. I pay for my own walls. She shakes her head like I've mispronounced a word she invented. Walls are not a family. There is gravy on the edge of the boat, a slow river threatening to spill. A candle gutters, sending up a wick-scorched curl of smoke that smells like every December I ever tried to fix. I notice too much, which is my curse and my craft. David shifts topics with a brother's grace. He asks about a museum exhibit in Chelsea and invites me on air, so there is proof of his good-heartedness. Mom cuts him off with a story about his childhood science fair, how he built a volcano that taught the neighborhood children the majesty of geology, a phrase no child has ever said. I can see the metals in her eyes, burnished by time, polished by the needs of now. My first-grade teacher said I had a talent for writing. I offer, soft. She used the word voice. Mom pauses. A tiny victory for me I try not to chase. You always did talk a lot, she says and moves on. Slice, move on. Slice. The potatoes pass. I spoon some onto my plate and make a crater with the back of the spoon. When I fill it with gravy, I think absurdly of sinkholes, of earth giving way beneath whatever insists on being heavy. Do you still do your videos? She asks, and I know she means the campaign spots, the testimonials, the pieces we cut with trembling hands and trembling voices. Yes, I say. We just finished one about a clinic in the Bronx. A woman told the camera if it hadn't been for the nurse who called her back, she would have. Some people love to perform, Mom says. Trauma as entertainment. She tosses the phrase like confetti and expects it to fall pretty. I think of it as honesty, I say, as telling the truth aloud before it eats you. Such dramatic language, she murmurs. You always were dramatic. Remember when you cried over a kite? She laughs and looks around for witnesses that remember a version of me she prefers. Hannah obliges with a sympathetic, "Aw," and Dad checks his watch as if the minute hand might save us. I feel the heat crawl up my neck and bring the water glass to my lip, cold against the place where my pulse lives. Around us, the room is a choreography of small noises. Thymes singing, napkins sighing, chair legs scraping wood. Under it all, the drum of my own body, steady, stubborn. I picture the square of sky I can see from my Brooklyn fire escape, that stubborn sliver that never gets stolen by taller buildings, and breathe into it. Tell us something you're grateful for, Mom commands. Not a suggestion, a ritual she wields like a conductor's baton. It's not the moment later with pumpkin pie, but I can see the shape of it arriving, the way a wave betrays itself at the horizon. I'm grateful for my apartment, I say, for the light that hits my plants at 3 p.m. like it has something to confess. For mornings I make coffee and it tastes like forgiveness. Dad nods, maybe because coffee is an object that doesn't argue. David smiles, an honest thing slipping past his training. Hannah says, "That's poetic," in a voice that translates to impractical. I'm grateful for family, Mom says, and looks right through me to the couple at the end of the table. For legacy, for children who remember to call. It is not a knife this time, it is a chorus. The room hums with it, that song she wrote years ago and never stopped singing. It's catchy if you do not know the words are a cage. More bread? David asks, offering the basket like a lifeline. I take a slice and tear it in two. The soft give in the middle reminds me of something I can't name. Dessert soon, Mom announces, standing to smooth a wrinkle that does not exist. We have pumpkin, of course. Classic never fails. There's that word again, classic, as if new is a threat, as if change is a stain you can pre-treat if you catch it fast enough. I watch her glide toward the kitchen, queen of a kingdom built on timing and fear, and know, with a certainty that tastes like citrus on the back of my tongue, that we are not done. Not yet. A storm says hello before it sits down, and I, for once, am not looking for an umbrella. I am learning how to stand in the rain and not apologize for being wet. When she returns with the pie, I can already feel the air shift. The knives have been sharpened on the small talk. The plates gleam, expectant. We are moving towards something she thinks she wants, something she believes she can control with neat slices and a dollop of cream. And every tiny cut that came before, every comment about sleeves, about neighborhoods, about adjectives and dogs and cooking, has done its work, not to weaken me, to make me precise, to show me exactly where the blade goes dull and exactly where the truth begins to shine. Pumpkin pie is breathing cinnamon into the room, and I can taste the sentence my mother will throw like a fork across the table. She will call me a mistake. I don't know the exact second yet, only that it will come sticky and sweet, wrapped in polite laughter that cuts sharper than knives. Before that, though, before the pie and the word mistake lands like a stamp across my forehead, there are two people who keep me from disappearing. They don't make speeches. They don't bang fists. They just stand where the floor gives way and lend me a little ground. Aunt Rose finds me first, the way a lighthouse finds a boat by accident. I'm at the sink, rinsing glasses I was told not to touch. The water is too hot. It turns my hands pink. The window over the basin fogs, blurring the backyard into a watercolor of bare branches and one stubborn string of orange lights. The dining room buzzes behind me. Cutlery, chair legs, the rattle of stories nobody asked for. Rose steps in, nudges the door with her hip so it doesn't creak, and sets a plate of bread on the counter as if the counter needs bread to keep its balance. Too hot, she murmurs, reaching past me to nudge the faucet toward cool. Her fingers brush my wrist. They're cold, ringed with thin gold bands that look like they've been warmed by years of sun. Your hands are too good for boiling. I make a joke, because I have to. My hands are good for many forbidden things, like existing. She doesn't laugh. She lifts a towel and does the smallest, bravest thing I've seen all night. She dries the glass I'm holding without checking for water spots, without peering through it for flaws. Helen, she says, my name soft as steam. I'm glad you're here. There's a pause where I could unload everything. How the place cards seated me in the draft by the hallway. How every compliment ricochets into a correction. How David's new house has a driveway long enough to pave his future. Instead, I say, I brought a pie. I saw. She smiles sideways, conspiratorial. And I hid a slice for you already, far back of the fridge. She taps the door like it's a secret. Insurance. Insurance. The word tucks itself in my pocket. I watch her wrists move, towel in one hand, glass in the other, and think how her movements make space without pushing. You always do this, I say. You sneak me oxygen, my mouth bends. Someone has to crack a window. The kitchen light hums. The clock above the stove stutters between seconds, like it's not sure time should move forward. We stand there, quiet, the way people do when they're leaving words to proof on the counter a few minutes longer. Then she touches my elbow. If it gets loud, touch your necklace. I'll see it. I'll come sit on your bad side. My bad side? The side they aim at, she says. And that's it. She leaves the towel folded in a perfect square and slips back toward the dining room, where the chandelier has the nerve to sparkle. I breathe in. The air tastes like gravy, thyme, and the part of me that is 10 years old and at the mercy of a chart no one else can see. I finish the glasses. I wipe the sink. I press 2 fingers to the hummingbird charm at my throat, feeling for proof that I'm the person who bought it last spring on a Tuesday, when it rained and no one told me I was too much. Uncle Alan intercepts me near the hallway, where the photos line up like a jury. Weddings, diplomas, ribbon cuttings, David squinting at a little league ball he's about to hit because he always hits. Alan has a mechanic's hands, thick palms nicked by work, the kind that can coax life from things that want to stall. He holds a platter of sweet potatoes heavy as regret. "Engineer this for me, kiddo," he says. "They designed this dish to be heavier than gravity." He leans the platter onto the buffet table and then leans himself toward me, a casual tilt that blocks sightlines. "You good?" "Define good," I say. "I can still count to 10? "Don't go higher than that." He scans the room with me, my father adjusting silverware as if straightness equals safety, my mother rehearsing a smile in the reflection of the cabinet door, David polishing a story he plans to tell about his promotion. "You look like you're keeping a whole bridge from collapsing with your shoulders. And try this instead," he adds, and he shifts his stance, knees loose, weight on heels. "When I used to crawl under cars, the new guy's shoulders would lock up. You can't loosen bolts with a locked back. Sink a little. Let the frame carry itself." I imitate him. My center of gravity drops an inch. Something quiet inside my spine unclenches. "Better," he says, and pretends to be interested in the yams. "I'll be at 12 o'clock from you. If you need an exit, I'll invent a reason for the salt." "The salt?"
"I'll declare a salt emergency. Everyone loves a mission. You'll walk with me to the kitchen like you're doing me a favor." He pats my forearm twice, a code we haven't earned, but get to use tonight. "We'll fix whatever needs fixin' out of range." Someone calls his name. He scoops up a ladle like a baton and is gone, peppering jokes into a table conversation until people are smiling without knowing why. The next drift of minutes is what I fear and know too well. The dining room swells with the ritual, the "I'm thankful for" speeches that commute into a subtle traffic of comparisons. Gratitude is just another currency here. It has faces on it, and mine never appears. Mom does what she always does. She praises David's steady hands, his future children's inevitable eyelashes, the sacrifice Stephanie made when she chose family over career, the kind she has no interest in planning for me. I feel the room tighten around those words like a belt notch. But there's Rose at 9 o'clock, hooking her foot around the leg of my chair so it can't drift. When the first barb skitters across the tablecloth, some people aren't natural hosts. Rose tilts her head and asks about the pie crust like curiosity is a shield. The conversation detours, harmless for a breath, when Mom catalogs the proper sequence for washing crystal and makes eye contact with me as if I'm a cautionary tale. Rose touches her napkin to her lip, the smallest shake of her head, as if to say, no, not tonight. And there's Alan, at 12 o'clock, launching a story about a gasket that saved a wedding. He invents comic velocity with nothing but rhythm. Every time the word "again" sharpens in my mother's throat, he throws a new gear into the tale. And then, you won't believe the noise the radiator made, and the room laughs, a laugh that costs nothing and buys me time. It isn't enough to stop the arrows. It is enough to make them travel slower. At one point, Dad asks me about work. He always picks softballs. "The agency's still in Manhattan?" As if agencies are migratory. I answer simply, because simple is what breathes. Mom interrupts to say, "Did you know David's firm is sending him to Zurich? Zurich, Helen." She loves proper nouns that can do her bragging. I look at the reflection of the chandelier in my water glass. It fractures, a dozen tiny suns. Alan coughs. It's a gentle, deliberate sound, the kind of cough that resets a room's metronome. "Zurich is cold," he says. "Brooklyn's got better pizza." "Not everything is pizza," Mom says, brittle. "Ideally, no," he says, and adds with that mechanic's half smile, "but it's a better scale than weather." Rose picks up the baton. "Helen, what book are you bringing to the subway lately?" It's such a harmless question. It should float away.
But it lands like a blanket, I tell her. She says she tried that author and gave up. Maybe I'll try again, she adds. People deserve second reads. Knee and knee. You are your called were you hypered. You have no happy ado it. Is knee is a mind way. We have a build some me. She learned be any female that we have it. This willand the certain says and is an eed because I can't send a to it. After the name in the same thing, there a purposed of the mind way. No spirit set has been, and knee is a 10 time, and no one I add keeper from the curtender as the mind. Society it happened with it. Winds in trop. Bring creation and a few months sisters. Second reads, insurance, salt emergencies. These are not grand gestures. They're sandbags against a flood that hasn't fully breached the levee yet. I arrange them in my head like a map, with coordinates. 9 o'clock, Rose. 12, Alan. 6, my own breath. There is a moment, the kind you don't notice until later, when the air changes grain. The kitchen timer dings, though nothing is in the oven. The furnace kicks on with a thud. Somewhere a dog barks at an ending only he can hear. Mom is stacking her next thought. I can feel the weight of it in her shoulders. She glances at the sideboard where the desserts wait, at the blade of the pie server catching chandelier light like a wink. I touch my necklace. Rose's gaze flickers. Alan shifts his chair. The scrape quiet. Not to draw attention, just enough to say, we are here, we are awake, we are not letting you stand alone. And inside me, a sentence I haven't said yet begins to take shape. It has the clean edges of a tool honed for one job. It is not rage. It's a key. The words click together. You never wanted to be my mother at all. I don't speak them, not now, not yet. I turn them over like a coin in my palm, feeling both faces, the loss and the freedom. I hear how they will sound in the air. Not shouted, not broken, just true. I practice the silence that will follow, the kind that terrifies people who live on noise. But that is later. Right now is the soft work that never makes it into the toast. Hands finding faucets, chairs finding angles, the choreography of people who know where the bruises are and step around them without asking for applause. Rose leans closer and tells me, after dessert, I'll need your help with coffee. Alan says across the table, I'll need your opinion on a story ending. 2 errands, 2 exits, 2 promises that I will not be trapped when it hits. The pumpkin pie waits, smug and fragrant. My mother sharpens her smile. If I close my eyes, I can feel the room tilt toward the moment I've been dreading since August. I open them again and take inventory. A towel folded in a square, a ladle abandoned at the edge of a bowl, my breath sitting where I left it. I sit up straighter, but not to brace, to receive, to be the person who can stand in a room that tells an old story and decide to tell a new one. The allies are quiet, but I have learned to read quiet like most people read headlines. Their presence knits my edges back together. Later, after the pie, after the word mistake slices the room into before and after, I will say the sentence waiting behind my teeth, and the world will change temperature. For now, I let the fork's tines rest against china. I let the hum of the house draw a line under the evening. I look left, I look right. I press my fingers to the hummingbird and feel it beat back. I am not alone. I never was. I just needed to notice the people holding the corners of the table when it starts to shake. Pumpkin pie was still warm when my mother called me a mistake. The steam curled up from the cut edge like a quiet ghost, and she said it the way some people talk about weather. Lightly, almost bored, as if facts were just facts. A fork clinked against china. Someone laughed too loudly, then swallowed it. Cinnamon, nutmeg, and something scorched drifted through the dining room. I tasted metal in my mouth and couldn't tell if it was from the knife she just slid between us or from the coffee I hadn't sweetened enough. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Dessert began with her performance. It always does. She passed the pie with both hands like a hymn book and announced, "It's nothing special," which in our family means, "Please tell me it's perfect." The knives flashed under the chandelier as slices slid onto plates. Whipped cream stood in bright, soft ridges, immaculate, like snow berms along a plowed street. The table glittered with teaspoons and those little silver coffee spoons she brings out once a year to remind us she owns them. She lifted her cup with 2 fingers and waited for the room to quiet. It did, because the room obeys her. "I never did master crust the way my mother did," she began, eyes damp with nostalgia that wasn't for me. "Do you remember when Helen tried to help and turned the filling into a soup?" There it was, the first little dagger. Familiar shape, familiar sting. She smiled like it was a cute story about a toddler. I was 14 in that memory. 14, and she'd swatted my wrist for pressing too hard. I heard the radiator sigh, the chandelier hum. David looked down at his plate as if the pumpkin might offer an answer. Aunt Rose cleared her throat, her polite way of objecting, and said, "I thought it was the sweetest thing. She wanted to surprise you." My mother tilted her head, poured more coffee, and let that defense evaporate like steam. "And the yams!" She snapped her fingers as if the thought had just sprung to life. "The famous marshmallow incident." A sweep of her hand, a ripple of chuckles. The marshmallows had caught fire that year. I was 8. I stood in the kitchen holding a glass of water like a firefighter without a hose while she told me, "If you're going to do something, do it properly or don't do it at all." Everyone laughed now, as though I'd been an adorable gremlin and not a little girl trying too hard. I smiled. My mouth did the muscle memory of it. Inside, the room tilted like a picture hung 1 nail off center. She cut another slice, thin as paper, and her knife scraped the plate. "Do you know what else I remember?" Her voice warmed, cozy, the way it always does before it turns sharp. The candle toppled onto the runner because someone, she flicked her eyes at me with the flare of a match, insisted on helping with centerpieces. More laughter. My father stirred his coffee, stirred and stirred. Those tiny circles, the spoon tapping the porcelain soft as a metronome, marking the tempo of cowardice. I inhaled through my nose, cinnamon, clove. The faint lemon polish of her sideboard. On my tongue, the pie tasted good and wrong at the same time. "Speaking of helping," she said, pivoting without a seam, "I saw the cutest video of that preschool down the block. All the little girls in tutus, tiptoeing." Her eyes landed on me again like a pin. "Helen never could manage ballet, heavy feet. Do you remember, David? We finally switched her to swim team. It kept her busy." She said busy the way people say sedated. Aunt Rose took a sip of water. "She won races," she said, a point laid gently on the table. My mother nodded graciously, as if she'd been the one in the pool. "Yes, darling, but not everything's about medals. Grace matters too." She looked at my hands as if they were hammers. I put my fork down so softly it made no sound at all. The safe part of me wanted to change the subject, to ask David about his project, to ask anyone about anything. The honest part of me wanted, I don't know, silence, a door, a clean line through the middle of the table. Instead, I watched her refill cups. The coffee glugged from the silver pot in a steady, satisfied stream. She loves that pot, loves the weight of it, loves the way it reflects her face back at her in a tall oval. "You know who has Grace," she said, brightening. David's wife. The way she carries herself. She turned to David with a soft beam. You chose well. You always do. The table murmured its agreement. My chest felt like it had been laced too tight, as if someone had pulled the corset strings one tug past breathable. I tried to focus on the pie between us. The cut face of it looked like late afternoon in October. Smooth, firm, a seam where the knife had passed, clean and unforgiving. She set down the pot. The sound of metal against the trivet made me flinch. Isn't it funny, she continued, how things turn out? David always had such purpose. He knew where he was going. Some people, and now her gaze held mine like a pressed thumb. Wander. The word hung above my plate, a lampshade over a low bulb. Wander. Like I had no home. Like New York, the life I built from scratch, the rent I pay, the projects I run, the friends who'd cross town at midnight was a detour instead of a destination. Uncle Alan, across from me, leaned back and laced his fingers over his stomach. Purpose can be many things, he said, casual, like tossing a pebble in a river and watching it disappear. My mother offered him a smile that said thank you for your contribution, and then moved the spotlight where she wanted it. She turned to me. Are you decorating for Christmas this year? The tone, sing-song sweet, the trap, obvious. Decorate too much and I look desperate. Decorate too little and I'm a Grinch. I shrugged lightly. A small tree. Lights. Enough, I said. Enough, she repeated, tasting it. Well, when it's just you, enough is enough. She laughed. A few people echoed it. The laugh bumped against my skin and fell to the floor. I could feel the edges sharpening. The room does this thing before it cuts, goes soft, like a filter over a camera. Everyone's faces seemed a fraction blurrier. The chandelier's light frayed. The crystal at each place setting made a small constellation, and all the stars felt a little too close. Then she did the thing she does when she's about to fire. She softened her mouth, lowered her voice, and tilted her head as if she were confiding something intimate out of love. We talk about family so much this time of year, she said. Isn't family everything? She let the question float, a balloon tugging at its string. No one answered. Of course, she continued, some women choose career. They wake up at a certain age and realize... She stopped, smiled as if she'd rescued me from an ugly end and slid the sugar bowl closer to me like it could sweeten what was coming next. David shifted in his chair. The leather creaked. He didn't look at me, but his hand curled into his napkin. I want to say there was a warning siren, a drum roll, the room dimming. But it wasn't theater. It was Thursday. It was pumpkin pie and coffee and the soft thud of a toddler's socks on the hallway runner and the radiator whispering and the smell of pastry and the sting of polish in the air. It was ordinary, which made it worse. She cut herself the thinnest slice yet, lifted the fork, and kept her eyes on the plate, as if she were telling the story to her dessert. You know, she said, and her voice took on that bright, breezy tone she uses to talk about sales at the mall. We didn't plan you. My father set his spoon down quietly. He looked at the table, then at his lap, then at the window where the dark glass reflected a room back at us like an accusation. She continued, steady as pouring. We were so young, we wanted Europe. Your father had plans. A small laugh. And then, surprise, she finally looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the relief of a truth she'd been rehearsing for years. You were a mistake, she said, and then, lighter, cheerier, like this part was a punchline we could all agree on, sometimes I wish I hadn't had you at all. The room made a sound I have never heard before. Not silence, not noise. Something that happens when sound remembers it's made of air and drops to the floor in pieces. A spoon tinkled against a saucer, then lay still. Aunt Rose's hand flew to her throat. Uncle Alan said my name, just that, Helen, and then swallowed it. David's jaw worked once, twice, like he was trying to chew a word that wouldn't break. Someone laughed. It might have been Stephanie, nervous and quick and immediately sorry. My father made a small, apologetic noise that could have been a cough. The chandelier hummed. I saw everything at once, the ridge of whipped cream sliding a millimeter as the heat finally won, the little nick on the rim of my plate from some other year's fork, the way my mother's necklace, not the pearls, the new chain, caught and threw a line of light onto her collarbone. I smelled orange peel. I tasted iron. My hands were steady and cold. She took another bite, tiny, bird-like. The fork clicked. She chewed. She dabbed at the corner of her mouth with the napkin she'd ironed an hour before I arrived. She looked pleased with her tidiness. Here's what happens inside a body that's been training its whole life for an earthquake. The breaths go long and low. The pulse finds a metronome in your ear. The edges of the world sharpen and soften at the same time, like frost tracing a window. You inventory an exit. You inventory a choice. Stay, swallow, smile, or don't. I placed my fork parallel to the edge of the plate. My napkin lay in a perfect square. The coffee was cooling fast. I watched the breath gather in my chest the way you watch a wave lift, knowing it's going to break whether you ask it to or not. My mother looked at me finally, fully, waiting to see what I would do with the story she'd just told about my life. I lifted my eyes and met hers. The table faded to a smear at the edges. David didn't move. Aunt Rose didn't breathe. The chandelier hummed, the radiator whispered, and winter pressed its face to the window to see. I let the next breath come all the way in. I held it until I could hear the ocean inside it. And then I opened my mouth. Pumpkin pie cooling on my plate, the whipped cream slipping at the edges, and my mother smiling like a hostess in a magazine, as she said I was a mistake. She said it lightly, the way people say the weather is nice, as if the words had no weight, as if they wouldn't land in my chest with a thud. A few people laughed, those polite, scared little laughs you give a joke you don't understand but think you should. The fork in my hand suddenly felt heavy. The air in the room shifted, thinner, sharper, like we had climbed a flight of invisible stairs. I watched the steam from the coffee cups curl and disappear. The chandelier hummed. China whispered against linen. Somewhere a radiator clicked and sighed. For a second, I thought I might stand up and scream, throw the plate, make a scene big enough to match the size of that sentence. But I didn't. I placed the fork down so the tines lined up with the rim of the plate. I pressed my palms flat on the tablecloth to feel the weave. I took a breath, the kind you learn in therapy. In through the nose, hold, out, slow enough that only you know you are doing it. No one moved. Aunt Rose's napkin paused halfway to her lips. Uncle Alan's jaw set the way it does when he's trying not to swear. David looked at me, then at our mother, then back at me, eyes wide, like he couldn't figure out where to land. My father stared into his cup as if the answer might be at the bottom. My mother, head tipped, watched me the way a cat watches a bird, pleased with the little flutter it causes. In the silence, I heard things I never let myself hear. The pulse in my ears, my name, Helen, inside my own head, spoken kindly, not as a scold. I looked down at the pumpkin pie, the tiny ridges where the knife had cut, the small fracture in the crust near the point, the way the orange filling held the shape of a spoon. I thought about every holiday table where I learned to swallow the thing I really meant to say. I thought about New York, my windows at night, the city shimmering like a promise. I thought about being 8 and apologizing for breathing too loud, about being 15 and shrinking on purpose, about being 29 and still trying to earn a mother. I lifted my eyes. My mother was still smiling. The room smelled like nutmeg and dish soap. "Say something," her smile said without moving. "Be the polite girl. Make it easy for me to be cruel." I didn't clear my throat. I didn't apologize. I didn't rush. Words, when they are the right ones, don't like to be chased. They like to be invited. At first, I tried on anger in my mind, like a coat. "You're awful. You always have been." But it didn't fit. Too hot, too loud. Anger would give her something to push against. I wanted air, not a fight. So I gave the truth. Bare hands, bare voice. "I thought," I said, and my voice surprised me. Steady, gentle, almost quiet enough to be a secret. "You were just a terrible mother." The room went still in a new way. Not the shock still from the insult, a listening still. The kind when the orchestra lifts their bows and you feel the note before it comes. I kept my eyes on her. But now I understand. I let the words unfold one after the other, not crowding them. I watched a tiny muscle in her cheek twitch. I watched her hand tighten on her spoon. "You never wanted to be my mother at all." The sentence landed like the softest stone, the kind that doesn't crack the surface so much as sink, clean, inevitable, until it reaches the true bottom. No one breathed. The chandelier hummed louder in the quiet. The steam from the coffee thinned, then vanished. My mother's face drained so fast I thought for a moment she might be ill. Her mouth opened and closed twice without sound, like she had forgotten how to use it. My father looked up as if he had heard his name from a far room. Aunt Rose's napkin was pressed against her sternum now, not her mouth. Uncle Alan leaned back, slow, as if giving the truth a little more room to expand. David's eyes shone, and he didn't blink. I didn't look away. It wasn't defiance. It was simple presence. I was here. I had said what I came all the way through childhood to say. The tablecloth left faint lines on my palms, and I liked the way they felt. Proof I was touching something real. My mother tried to laugh, a bright sound that got stuck halfway. She reached for a script she knew, the one where I misheard, overreacted, misremembered. "Don't be dramatic, Helen," she started, but her voice wobbled on my name. She swallowed. She glanced at each face and found no anchor. The smile slid. For once, there was nowhere to put the blame that would stick. I didn't fill the silence for her. That had been my job in this family. Spackle over the cracks, sit up straight, be nice, swallow it. Not now. Silence can be a boundary if you let it. A slow heat spread through my chest. Not rage, not satisfaction. Something like alignment, bones stacking the way they are meant to stack. I thought of the years I tried to be a shape that would please her. Smaller, quieter, smarter, prettier, easier. All of them costumes that chafed. I thought of the small, ordinary ways you earn yourself back. Buying flowers on a Tuesday. Leaving a party when your skin says it's time. Telling the truth even if your voice shakes. My voice wasn't shaking. "Is that what you think?" she managed, finally, and there it was. The reaching hand of the old game. The tug toward the dance floor we knew too well. Argue about the wording. Argue about my tone. Make me prove my pain. "I know what I lived," I said. Not louder, just true. The radiator sighed. Outside, tires hissed on wet pavement. A small draft worked the corner of the lace curtain. It was all suddenly very beautiful to me. This plain room where I had learned to take up less space, I sat up straighter. I let my shoulders drop. On my plate, the whipped cream had melted into the pie. A tiny river of white ran into orange. I picked up the fork again, not to eat, just to feel the weight change in my hand. My mother watched the movement as though it were a threat. Maybe it was. Nothing breaks control more cleanly than a person who refuses to perform for it. My father cleared his throat, a dry sound. "Coffee?" he said to no one, to everyone, to the air. No one answered. He reached for the carafe and stopped, like his hand had run into glass.
"You're being ungrateful," my mother tried again, but the sentence collapsed under its own habit.
Aunt Rose made a small, startled sound that was mostly breath. Uncle Alan looked at my mother like she was a stranger he had met once at a bank. David's fingers curled against the table edge. He was making crescents in the linen. "I'm being honest," I said. 3 words, simple as water. I set them down between us and let them stay. I didn't explain. Explanations were how I'd always talked myself out of the truth, turning it until it looked like a misunderstanding we could all live with. The truth doesn't need defending. It needs air. My mother blinked fast, as if she could clear the room by clearing her eyes. Her tongue touched her lip, a tiny nervous gesture I had never seen on her face. Power looks delicate when you take away the stage. No one asked me to soften it. No one offered her a bridge. The silence turned from shock to acknowledgement, the way a tide turns so slowly you only notice when your shoes are wet.
Even the house seemed to shift.
Some slight settling in the wood, an old place preparing to hold a new story. I breathed again. This breath reached the bottom of my lungs. It brought with it a steadying thought. I have nothing to prove in this room. Not anymore. Not to her, not to anyone. My body recognized it first, the way bodies do. Knees unlocking, hands unballing, the ache at the base of my skull easing like a knot untied. My mother opened her mouth one more time and found nothing there but the clink of her spoon against the saucer. She looked smaller in her chair. Or maybe I had finally returned to my full height. "That's all," I said, not as a threat, not as a plea, as a completion. Then I folded my napkin, slow, precise, the way you do when you are done with a meal. I didn't stand, not yet. I let the room live with the sentence I had given it. I let myself live with it, too. The chandelier hummed, the coffee cooled. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked twice and stopped. My mother stared at a point just past my shoulder, like the wallpaper had begun to speak. I met the air between us like a doorway and stepped, inside myself, not away. The perfect reply wasn't clever, it wasn't sharp, it was simple, it was mine. And for the first time at this table, I felt full. Pumpkin pie was still sweet on my tongue when my mother called me a mistake. The words slid across the table like a knife disguised as silverware, and people chuckled because that's what people do when cruelty puts on a cardigan and calls itself tradition. My fork went down. Time narrowed, like the dining room had been cinched by an invisible belt, and then I said it. Slow, clear, no tremor. "You never wanted to be my mother at all." It hung there between the candles and the crystal, and the room forgot how to breathe. The chandelier hummed, china stopped clinking, the pie's spice curled up into my nose and turned metallic. My mother's eyes, blue, polished, unblinking, lost their script. My father stared at his hands, thumbs pressing into one another as if he could rub a conflict-free future out of skin. David stared at me like he was watching the ground tilt, waiting to see which way the house would slide. No one moved. A draft licked the back of my neck. I felt the lace edge of the tablecloth against my knee, the slight give of the chair cushion under my thighs, the tightness of my dress at the ribs. I noticed everything, because noticing was the only thing that didn't hurt. I folded my napkin, not to be tidy, but to give my hands a job. It made no sound. I set it beside the plate, parallel to the dessert fork I hadn't used. My breath was steady. I watched the last curl of steam leave my coffee and vanish like it had made better choices than the rest of us. "I'm going," I said, to the room, to the ceiling, to whoever in this house remembered what kindness felt like. My voice surprised me. It wasn't loud. It was finished. "Helen." My father half rose, then sat again, as if the chair had a claim on him. "There's coffee. Maybe we can all—" "Don't," I said gently. I wasn't angry at him, not right then. His shoulders had been slumped for decades. Asking him to lift them tonight felt like asking a winter tree to bloom. My mother finally blinked, her mouth parted, glossy and silent. I saw a dozen shapes of words pass across her face: accusation, wounded pride, the legalese of a lifetime's defense, and then evaporate like the steam. She let her hand hover over her place setting, fingers splayed, the queen of a small, shaking country that suddenly refused to kneel. David scraped his chair. He stopped, swallowed.
Do you need a ride? I drove. I said, I'm okay.
He looked relieved and disappointed at the same time, like I'd spared him the right thing and stolen from him the chance to do it. Behind the centerpiece, the pie glowed a tender orange. I thought, absurdly, of the bakery box in the kitchen with its cotton string, the way I'd tied it twice so it wouldn't come open in the car. I had wanted to show up right, knowing even then that right wouldn't be recognized here. The chair legs made a soft sound when I pushed back. I stood. The room let out a breath it hadn't earned. I felt the heat of the oven lingering in the air, how it had saturated the house all day. It clung to us like a memory we kept insisting was love. I reached for my coat on the back of my chair, wool against my palm, the smooth slide of the lining, the scent of the city still in it, cold metal, rain, dog, a hint of the deli downstairs from my apartment. It felt like permission. "Where are you going?" My mother's voice finally arrived. It was smaller than usual, a bell rung under a blanket. She wasn't asking for information, she was calling me back to the script. "Outside," I said. "Home." The word felt new in my mouth, like a door I'd had the key to all along and never dared to turn. I walked. The hallway framed me in old family photos. Glossy smiles, forced arms, summers at a lake I barely remembered liking. My heels clicked on the hard wood. In the kitchen, a candle sputtered on the island and then went out, a tiny exhale that made me feel wildly superstitious. "Kiddo," a voice said, low and roughened by decades of someone else's weather. Uncle Allen. He had gotten up without noise, like he always did when he was about to do something kind that might irritate the people who mistook drama for importance. "I'll walk you." I nodded without looking at him, because if I looked at him, I might soften, and I didn't want to be soft yet. At the front closet, I grabbed my scarf. The wool kissed my throat. I slid the key from my purse into my coat pocket, an anchor. From the dining room, porcelain murmured as someone pretended to tidy. My mother's chair didn't move. My father coughed, a helpless percussion. David said nothing. Silence spread its white tablecloth over all of them and tucked it in tight. I opened the door. The night snapped at us, clean and cold, glittering with starlight that the city never lets me see. November air filled my lungs like a promise. "I will keep you awake." The porch light made a soft halo on the steps. The maple in the yard held onto a few stubborn leaves, and the last of them chattered like teeth. We stepped onto the stone path. Gravel made its small music. Uncle Allen's shoes scuffed just behind mine, keeping pace, not crowding.
He had always understood spacing, the art of being close without being heavy. "You okay?" he said after a few steps, voice pitched to the night so it wouldn't be stolen back into the house. "I think so." The truth surprised me. I checked for shaking and found steadiness. I checked for anger and found something cleaner. A winter sky after the storm has finally moved on. He nodded like I'd told him a technical detail about a car engine. "Good." They pulled his collar up and peered down the street, as if safety might be approaching with its headlights off. We reached the mailbox, cold metal against my knuckles as I steadied myself for no real reason. I looked back at the house, yellow squares of light cut into the dark. From here, the dining room looked quiet and pretty. No sound traveled except the furnace cycling on, the low, faithful animal of a well-maintained home doing its job. A small laugh escaped me. It startled both of us. "What?" he asked. "It looks perfect," I said. "From out here. Like it always did." I bit the inside of my cheek. It's easier to love it when I can't hear it. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, almost a sigh. "Houses are like people," he said. "You think you live in them. Turns out, they try to live in you." We stood there for a moment, breathing out little ghosts. My car waited by the curb, a dark shape with frost beginning to lace the windshield. I wanted the driver's seat like I wanted sleep. I wanted the wheel under my hands and the road unspooling and the quiet company of a radio station that didn't know my name. Alan touched my elbow. "You don't owe them the rest of your evening," he said, as if reading the part of me that was tempted to go back in and apologize to the air, just to make the plates stop rattling. "You don't owe them anything they refuse to offer you." "I know," I said. And I did. Suddenly, solidly. The knowing was not a thought. It was a posture. It set my shoulders, adjusted my spine, warmed the place behind my sternum like someone had finally closed a window that had been letting cold in for years. He looked at me the way some people look at mountains. "Good girl," he said, and the words didn't make me flinch because, with him, they never meant be small. They meant stand where you can see. The front door opened then. A rectangle of light poured onto the porch, and David's silhouette was inside it. He didn't step out. He pulled his sweater sleeves over his hand like the night would bite him. "Text me when you get home," he called, voice careful, like the wrong volume might set off an alarm. "I will," I said. We held each other's eyes for a heartbeat longer than habit. Something in his face had cracked tonight. I didn't know what would grow out of the crack, but the earth needs breaks to let seeds in. "Thanks," he said, and disappeared back into the light. Alan cleared his throat. "You want me to follow you just to—" "I'm okay," I said again, and meant it in a new way. "But thank you." We walked to the curb. My keys chimed in my hand. The street smelled like cold metal and damp leaves and someone's fireplace 2 blocks over. It smelled like the kind of truth that isn't loud but doesn't go away. "Hey," Alan said, stopping with me at the driver's side. He looked at me like he was putting something heavy but valuable into my arms. "Proud of you." "Me too," I said, and the words startled me so much I had to grip the doorframe to keep from swaying. I had never said them about myself without bracing for someone to snatch them back. I opened the door. The dome light blinked on. The seat waited the way it always waits, without judgment. I slid in. The fabric sighed. My coat compressed. My breath fogged the rear view for a second, and then cleared. Alan tapped the roof, the way men in old movies do, when the hero drives off into a life nobody thought she could claim. He stepped back. His breath hung in the air, a small flag in a wind I could finally feel on my own terms. I started the engine. It turned over, steady and sure. I let it idle, the soft purr a private applause. I checked the mirror. The house blinked at me, all lit up, a stage after the show, actors frozen in their marks, waiting for cues that weren't coming. My hands settled on the wheel at 10 and 2. I didn't make a wish. I didn't pray. I didn't rehearse my next line. I just breathed, put the car in drive, and let the night open its road. Pumpkin pie still burned the back of my throat when my mother called me a mistake, and it kept burning through the silence that followed my reply. I had said it slowly. You never wanted to be my mother at all. And the room dropped into a hush so complete I could hear the crystal humming where someone's spoon touched a glass. Chairs didn't scrape. Breath didn't move. Even the chandelier seemed to hold its light. I set my napkin down. I stood. I left. The door clicked behind me like a period at the end of a long, exhausting paragraph. The cold bit my cheeks the way truth bites when it's finally spoken. I walked to the curb, hugged my coat tighter, and stared at the curve of frost tracing the mailbox. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a trapped bee. Then again, and again. I didn't look right away. I just watched my breath fog and drift into the porch light. The world felt newly emptied and newly clean. First buzz I opened. David. You okay? That was a lot. I'm in the kitchen. She's upstairs. A second message, almost on top of the first. I'm sorry she said that. The apology wasn't for me, not exactly. It was for the gravity of the thing that had just slipped out of orbit. I typed with stiff fingers. I'm safe. I needed to walk out before I vanished again. 3 dots pulsed, then disappeared, then came back. Okay, text me when you land somewhere. I can sneak out later if you want to talk. Another buzz. Dad. I didn't see his name. I saw home, the way you label a number when you don't want to look at the truth. Let's keep this civil. Your mother's upset. We can discuss in the morning. Civil. The word made my mouth taste like aluminum. I put the phone down at my side and listened to the bare maple branches scrape each other like dry hands. I walked. I didn't plan where. Down the quiet block where everyone's pumpkins had turned soft around the edges. I passed a house that smelled like butter and cinnamon, and another that smelled like damp leaves. My hands steadied around the idea that I had stepped out of a room where the rules never once protected me. Somewhere behind me, the house kept radiating warmth that didn't reach me. By the time I hit the end of the street, my phone was a chorus. Aunt Rose. Proud of you. Call me when you can. Uncle Alan. You were clear and kind. Don't let anyone rewrite that, Lila. Yikes. Are you okay? Mom says your mom fainted, drama. I almost laughed. I turned the corner and followed the glow of a 24-hour diner, the only place in town that didn't care what holiday it was. The bell over the door jangled like an old joke. Heat hit me full in the face. Coffee, bacon grease, bleach. A waitress with tired eyeliner and a kind mouth nodded me toward a booth. I slid in, leather vinyl sighing under my coat. Coffee? She asked. Please. My voice sounded like I had just learned to walk. She set down a thick ceramic mug that had seen 1,000 ordinary nights. It steamed. It steadied me. My phone buzzed again. Mom. I almost didn't open it. Curiosity isn't kind. I did anyway. I cannot believe you chose to humiliate me like that. In front of everyone on a holiday. Some things are private, Helen. You owe me an apology. The words blurred and refocused. Humiliate, private, owe.
I rubbed my thumb along the mug's handle, felt the nick in the glaze where someone else's story had chipped it. I didn't reply. I lifted the coffee, took a long swallow, and let the heat settle somewhere my courage could reach. Another text from Mom arrived before the cup landed. Your aunt always hated me.
Of course she encouraged you. Don't let her poison you against your family.
The waitress slid a small plate with a single sugar packet across to me, a quiet offering. You look like someone said something they can't unsay, she said softly. They did, I said, and I did too. She smiled like someone who's heard every version of every family. Good, she said, and left me to it. My phone lit up with the family thread, the one that used to share photos of babies and ugly sweaters and David's fourth-grade science fair volcano. Tonight, it was a courtroom. Aunt Rose, we don't call our children mistakes ever. Cousin Nora, let's not do this here.
I never called her a mistake. I said we weren't prepared. She twisted it.
I was there. That's not what you said. I watched the tiny blue and gray bubbles duel. I watched as people I'd known since I was born chose their words like they were stepping between raindrops. A few left the thread silently. A few heart reacted to the wrong things. Dad finally dropped in. Everyone take a breath. We're all emotional. As if breath could flatten the landscape of a decade. David direct messaged again. She's rewriting it already. I know, I replied. Let it be her story. I have mine. He sent a single word. Good. Another ping. This one, a voicemail transcribed from Mom because even my phone knew I wouldn't pick up. If you think you can talk to me that way and still expect to be welcomed in this family, you are mistaken. You embarrassed me. You ruined the evening. People are leaving early because of you. I am sick over this. Sick, not sorry. I pictured the table, the fork I'd set parallel to the plate's rim, the pattern in the china I'd focused on instead of crying, the candle stub that had finally drowned in its own wax. I pictured my father pouring coffee into cups that didn't need it, his face arranged into the shape of a man managing a spill. I pictured David with one hand on the counter, phone hidden under it, thumb flying. The waitress topped me off. You want anything to eat? Maybe later, I said. I need to feel the coffee first. Take your time, she said. We're not going anywhere. That was the first kind sentence of the night that didn't ask me to shrink. I let it sit with me. Outside, a plow scraped past and threw a loose veil of slush against the curb. The diner's neon sign buzzed and blinked. P.N. Cakes, losing its A like a missing tooth, Uncle Allen called. I let it ring once, then answered. Kiddo, he said, voice low, the way you lower your voice when you're carrying a sleeping truth. You did what had to be done. I broke it, I said. It was already cracked, he said. You pointed to the crack. There's a difference. He didn't ask where I was. He didn't make me promise to come back. He only said, text me when you head out. I'll make sure you're not walking alone. When we hung up, I scrolled through more fallout. Cousin Lila sent a selfie from their car, mascara smudged, captioned, leaving early. Too much. Aunt Rose texted privately. If she calls, I'm not answering tonight. Rest, drink water. Dad again. Your mother has a migraine. Please don't make this worse. The way he balanced the teacup of her feelings on the tip of his finger and called it peace. I typed to him. I didn't make this, I named it. Then I deleted the text. Then I typed it again and sent it anyway. The little delivered felt like setting down a stone I'd carried in my mouth for years. Mom's name lit up on my screen once more. I muted the thread. Not blot, not forever, just quiet. The diner's clock ticked its indifferent seconds. A man at the counter stirred his soup without eating it.
A teenage couple in matching hoodies whispered and laughed and pressed their knees together under the table. The world hadn't ended. It had simply settled into a shape I recognized better. The waitress came back with a small bowl of salty fries I hadn't ordered. "On me," she said.
If I may, whoever told you that you were a mistake was wrong, I nodded. She wanted the life on the brochure. I didn't fit in the picture.
"Brochures are lies," she said kindly. "Menus are better."
I smiled, the first real one of the night.
I ate a fry that burned my tongue in a way that felt human. More texts thudded in, most of which could wait. A few couldn't. David again. "I told her I'm leaving too. She said I'm choosing sides. I told her I'm choosing truth." I closed my eyes and breathed. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 6. Not a technique, just survival. The coffee cooled. The fries disappeared. The neon hummed like a tired lullaby. When I finally stood to go, I paid in cash and tipped too much because the world had handed me a small kindness and I wanted to pay rent on it. Outside, the air slapped my face awake. I pulled my coat tight and started toward the hotel I'd booked that morning as if I had known something would come loose by nightfall. At the corner, my phone pinged once more. Mom again. One last shard for the night. "Don't contact us until you can apologize." I stared at the words long enough for my eyes to blur, long enough to feel the old reflex twitch, the one that made me call, clarify, soothe, repair. I let the reflex rise. I let it pass. Then I typed, slowly, the way I had spoken at the table. "I'm not sorry for telling the truth. Good night." I hit send. I turned off notifications. The street fell quiet except for my own footsteps. I walked toward a bed with clean sheets and no history. My breath made small clouds that vanished behind me, and for once, I didn't turn to check whether anyone was following. The night held, so did I. Pumpkin pie. That's what I remember first. The cinnamon, the gloss of the filling, the way the knife squeaked against the plate when my mother leaned in and called me a mistake. Clear as a bell, casual as weather. Someone laughed. A few someones, actually. The room tilted. And then I heard myself say the sentence I have rehearsed in my ribs for years, only I didn't know it until it came out. "You never wanted to be my mother at all." The table went quiet like a church after the organ stops. Forks hovered midair. My heartbeat softened into the kind of hush that makes you hear your own breath. I carried that silence with me into therapy. Dr. Klein's office is a long rectangle with a window that looks over a sliver of downtown Brooklyn. On good days, you can see the river flash. On bad days, all you get is the gray underside of clouds and the hiss of the radiator. Her chair is a deep blue thing that makes her look unreasonably calm, like a lake. I take the couch. I always sit on the edge, not because I plan to run, but because my body doesn't know the difference. "Walk me through it again," she says, from where the pie comes out. And so I do. The pie, the laugh track, my mother's mouth shaping the word mistake like she's choosing between desserts, the heat in my ears, the thin clatter of crystal, and then that sentence, my sentence, arriving like a key turning in a lock I didn't realize I'd been holding for 34 years. I tell her about the quiet afterwards, the way even the chandelier felt like it was listening. "What did you feel when you said it?" "Like my spine finally fit me," I say. Like I wasn't auditioning for my own life anymore. Unworthily, she waits. This is the part where I usually fill the space with jokes so we can both be comfortable. Today, I don't. I was also terrified, I add, like I'd done something irreversible. Truth is usually irreversible, she says. The radiator hisses, agreeing. We talk about roles, how every family writes a play and casts the children without their consent. David, my brother, the golden child, was handed the light. I was handed the shadow. My mother needed that contrast the way a painter needs negative space. Golden child and scapegoat, Dr. Klein says, like she's reading stage directions. It keeps the system balanced. Dysfunctional, but balanced. My father? I ask. Stage manager, she says, moving props, avoiding spotlights. Her words land gently, but they don't miss. I see it. How my father would shuffle in with napkins, with a joke about football, with a throat clearing that meant, let's not. How my mother's attention snapped toward David like a magnet, and away from me like a reflex. How I learned to build cathedrals out of achievements, and then apologize for them the second someone walked in. In therapy, definitions become furniture you can sit on. We name things, we name the bait. Her sugar-sweet remarks with a knife hidden under the frosting. We name my usual response, play small, take the blade, thank her for the slice. We name the party trick I perfected, translate cruelty into concern, plant it in my own chest, water it with shame. What changed at the table? She asks. I stopped translating, I say. The words surprise me with how clean they are. She said something cruel. I called it what it was. We practice calling things their names. Not dramatizing, not shrinking, just naming. When I say cruel, my voice trembles. When I say mistake, the air gets heavy. When I repeat my sentence, you never wanted to be my mother at all, I do it slower, like I'm setting it down on a shelf that can hold its weight. Dr. Klein doesn't interrupt. She lets the quiet do the work. Then we talk about boundaries, a word I used to hate because it sounded like other people's fences. Boundaries are not rules for other people, she says. They're rules you make and enforce for yourself. She has me try sentences aloud, simple ones a child could understand. I will not stay where I am insulted. I will leave when the conversation becomes unsafe. I do not negotiate my worth. It feels corny until it doesn't. It feels like finding the door in a room I thought was windowless. I keep wanting her to understand, I confess, to see me, to apologize like in movies, with a trembling voice and a hug and a recipe card for the rest of our lives. Wanting is human, she says. Waiting is optional, I laugh. It turns into a cough. On the street below, a truck groans into gear. In my chest, something loosens. I have been waiting for decades. Waiting turned into a lifestyle, an occupation, a religion. I have attended the Church of Someday and left with nothing but program notes. It makes me angry to realize it. It also makes me free. We rewind further, not to poke the bruise, but to learn the shape of it. There was the time in high school when my mother said my acceptance letter was a fluke. The time she told me my body would never be photogenic. The time she praised David for mowing the lawn and accused me of seeking attention when I won an award. Each memory arrives with its own weather system. We watch the storm fronts pass. She taught you to externalize credit and internalize blame, Dr. Klein says. It's a very reliable factory for shame. How do I shut down the factory? I ask. You walk out, she says, and you stop taking their orders. The line makes me smile. In my head, I see a conveyor belt of labels. Too much, not enough, difficult, ungrateful, marching toward me. I peel them off one by one and drop them in the trash. It feels childish. It feels brilliant. It feels like something a child should have been taught and wasn't, so an adult is learning it now. We write a boundary script. Not to send yet, not to declare war, but to give my nervous system a script as good as any of my mother's. It's 3 lines. I won't participate in conversations where I'm demeaned. I will leave or hang up when that happens.
If we're speaking, it's because respect is present.
I practice saying it out loud. At first, my voice apologizes between each period, like it's asking for permission. By the fourth try, the periods become periods. Full stop. The couch feels less like a ledge and more like a seat.
Your body is learning safety from you,
Dr. Klein says, not from their approval. That sentence rearranges my bones. We talk about grief without pretending it's a quick visitor. There is grief for what didn't happen,
for the mother I imagined,
for the scenes I wrote and rehearsed and never got to perform, the call where she says, "I'm sorry," the morning where she asks, "How are you really?" The hug that doesn't have conditions hidden in the sleeves. Grief is heavy but honest. It doesn't gaslight you. It tells you exactly what it is.
In its company, weirdly, I relax. I think about the silence after my sentence at the table.
It isn't the enemy anymore. It's a room where truth can stand up and stretch. In that silence, I wasn't abandoned. I was accompanied by myself.
I didn't know I could be such good company. I didn't know I could be the adult in the room when there were so many adults.
Can I ask something that feels disloyal? I say. Try me, she says. What if she never changes? Then your truth will, she says. It will grow. And we sit with that.
I picture my life not as a defense against her, but as a place with its own furniture.
Quiet mornings, a dog asleep like a warm comma at my feet, work I'm good at, a table where guests leave feeling larger than they arrived. None of that requires her permission. All of that can exist without her approval stamp in the corner. On my way out, the hallway smells like paper and lemon cleaner. Someone's laughing down the corridor. The elevator door takes a breath before it opens. In the mirrored panel, I catch sight of my face. It looks like me, not the performance version, the one who said the sentence and survived the silence, the one who will say it again if she has to, and then calmly collect her coat.
I step into the elevator and press the button.
The doors draw shut, smooth, inevitable. The cables hum. For a second, I think of the pie again, the shine of it, the tiny sun in the center of a room that went dark. I think of my mother's voice trying to rewrite me. And then I think of my own, slow and certain, shaping the truth and letting it ring. The car descends. My phone buzzes with a number I don't name. I let it buzz. Outside, the river will be doing what it always does, moving forward whether I watch it or not. I tuck the boundary script in my pocket like a spare key. The door in my life is not locked anymore. It was never locked. I just hadn't turned the handle. Pumpkin pie.
That's what I smell first when the memory breaks the surface. The cinnamon sting, the buttery crust, and then the sentence lands again, the one my mother tossed like a knife across the table. That I was a mistake. People laughed. Forks clinked. The chandelier hummed. My reply split the room and I walked out into the cold. Today, in Brooklyn, the pie is a stale slice behind glass, and the sentence sits between my brother and me like an extra chair. I can't take a bite without tasting it. I can't hear a spoon without hearing the laughter that followed it. David arrives late because he always does. Rain purls on his coat and refuses to soak in. He shakes it off by the door and scans for me like he's checking exits. When his eyes find mine, something softened and sorry flashes and then is gone. He comes over with that careful smile he learned from our father. Polite, neutral, promising nothing. "Hey," he says. "Hey," I say. My voice sounds like it slept in its shoes. The cafe is loud enough to be kind. Milk hisses, cups knock. Someone laughs too hard on a phone call. A barista draws a leaf in somebody's foam. We sit under a draft that smells like wet wool and espresso and October. He wraps his hands around the mug and doesn't drink. Steam climbs and disappears. I don't know where to start, he says. Try the beginning, I say, and feel how sharp that could be. I soften it. Wherever you can. He nods, eyes on the table, on the wood grain like a river map. Thanksgiving, he says. I heard her. I heard every word. I didn't say anything. He swallows. I've been replaying it. I keep thinking I'll dream a version where I stood up. I don't. I freeze every time. I let the silence stand between us and hold its own weight. I know, I say. The drip from his coat hits the floor in a slow metronome. He finally drinks, grimaces, sets the mug back like it might break. You were calm, he says.
That was... God, Helen, when you said it, the room changed shape.
My reply hangs in the air like another scent. I can feel it in my mouth again, the steady way it came, like a key clicking into a lock that had been jammed for years. I don't repeat it yet. I let him walk to it. He scrubs a hand over his face. I need to say this first. I benefited. I played my part. I liked being the easy one, the golden one. He says golden like it burns his tongue. It felt good to be praised, to be safe. I saw you shrink so Mom could feel bigger. I saw Dad disappear into his newspaper. I saw it, and I didn't want to trade places with you. I didn't want to risk losing what I had. His voice thins. I am sorry. The apology doesn't come wrapped in tissue paper or smothered in excuses. It arrives like a weather front. The room tilts. I watch a bubble rise in his coffee and pop. Say it again, I tell him, and I hear my own pettiness and my need. He nods. I'm sorry I let you stand alone, he says, steady now. I'm sorry I liked it that way. My throat does a small private thing. I look at the window so my eyes can find a different shine. Outside, a man drags a Christmas tree down the block in the rain, leaving a piney green scar on the sidewalk. The city moves like it doesn't know families have wars. What did it cost you? I ask. Being golden. He huffs a breath that is both a laugh and not. Everything I didn't choose, he says. The sport I loved until she decided it was a distraction. The girl she said was too loud and from the wrong neighborhood. I built a life that photographs well. I don't always fit in it. He taps his chest once. I think I learned to disappear a different way than you did. You went quiet so you wouldn't bleed in front of them. I went shiny so they wouldn't notice the cracks. We sit with that. It's a true thing, and true things deserve a moment. There were 100 small nights, I say. Remember the spelling bee? I won county. Mom said, we should get your brother a new mitt. He's going to have tryouts. I laugh, and it sounds like a cough. It was like I only mattered as a contrast, a cautionary tale about wanting the wrong things. Chapter. I remember, he says, quick, eager to hold a corner of the pain with me. I remember the way you got quiet in the car ride home. I thought, if I said how proud I was, it would make it worse somehow, that you'd think I was pitying you. Of one I got, you were 11, I say. I look at him full on. We were all children in that house, even the adults, I say. He nods. The rain slows, then quits altogether, and the window turns from blurred to exact. He shifts. His knee bumps the table. The cups clink. He flinches. You said something that night, he says, voice lower, like the table might be listening.
You said it like you'd been saving breath for it your whole life. His eyes lift. Say it again. I taste the metal of that room. I see the chandelier. I hear the laughter cut short. I feel the weight of the fork in my hand, the way I set it down just so. The way silence gathered itself like a cloak around my shoulders. I inhale and let the words come back in the same order, the only order that unlocks the door. I told her, I say, softer than the espresso hiss. You never wanted to be my mother at all. The cafe does a thing that rooms do when a line of truth walks in. It makes space. The grinder stops. A chair scrapes. Conversations bend around us like we're a stone in a river. And then it's loud again. The way pain always is. The way relief always insists on life continuing. David closes his eyes and nods once, as if receiving a blessing and a bruise at the same time. That sentence, he says. It took the trick out of her hands. It made everyone see the table, not the tablecloth. I can't unknow it, I say. I don't want to. He leans forward, elbows on the wood, palms open, empty. I want to be different now, he says. Not someday, now. I can't fix the years I let you carry it alone, but I can carry some of it now. I can tell the truth when she lies about what happened. I can say, don't talk about my sister like that when the room gets that old shape. He swallows. I started talking to a therapist. It feels like learning to walk on a floor that moves. The small smile that finds me is not sweet. It's something else. Good, I say. Here's what I need if we're going to have a relationship that's ours and not just a hallway in that house. And I count on my fingers because boundaries like to be seen. 1, no triangulating. You don't call me to translate her feelings. 2, if you call me from their kitchen and she's in the room, you say so. We don't perform for her. 3, when she says something about me, even if I'm not there, you say something, even a simple no. You don't have to make a speech. Just don't leave the chair empty again. His eyes glass and clear. He nods after each one like he's signing a contract. I can do that, he says. And can I ask for something? He swallows. If I mess up, if I freeze, don't disappear. Tell me I froze. Tell me you're angry. Let me come back and try again. I can do that, I say. But understand this part too. I won't climb back on that stage. I won't go to dinners to prove I'm polite. I won't stand there so she can practice cutting. You get me as your sister, not as her prop. He presses his hand flat on the table and leaves it there, an offering. His palm is warm. I place mine over it. The skin remembers being small in a hallway, both of us listening to a door we didn't dare open. It remembers the sound of a baseball game in the other room, the clatter of pans, the way love got rationed like sugar. I missed you, he says, so quietly I feel it more than hear it. I missed who we might have been, I say. It isn't cruel. It's the truest thing I own. We talk then, in the ordinary way families talk once the hard thing has had its seat and finished its drink, about his insomnia, about my dog who now refuses to sleep anywhere but by the door, about the bridge traffic, about the album we both somehow listened to in college without knowing it. We laugh, and the cafe joins in. The room likes us better like this. When he stands to go, the rain has finally stopped pretending it might come back. Outside is a cold shine. He hesitates, then leans in like brothers do when they are deciding whether to hug. We do. It is awkward and exactly right. His coat smells like rain and wool and something like effort. At the door, he looks back. "I'll call you Tuesday," he says, "from my car." "Good," I say. "I'll answer from my life." He smiles, full this time, and steps into the bright, damp afternoon. I sit for a minute longer and finish the coffee that's lost its heat. It's still coffee. Some things are good even when they're not warm. I look at the case and the tired slice of pie nobody wanted. The glass fogs with someone else's breath as they choose a dessert. I don't need one. Brother to brother, sister to sister. We are learning to talk without a warden. We are learning a language where the first word is truth, and the second is boundary, and the third is an open door that we both get to walk through. Separately, together. Pumpkin pie does this thing to me now. The smell of cinnamon and nutmeg lifts straight out of the oven and drifts down the hall. And bang! I'm back at that table, watching a silver fork catch the chandelier, hearing my mother's voice like a shard of glass. A mistake. Her word. Her laugh after. The nervous giggles around it. The clink of cups. The scrape of a chair that no one owned. I can still feel how my heart slowed, how my hands stopped trying to be small, how the room folded into a tunnel of light. And then I heard myself say it, careful and steady, like placing china on felt. "You never wanted to be my mother at all." The silence that followed had weight. It pressed on the tablecloth. It pressed on my ribs. It opened a door I hadn't known was there. A year later, the scent of pumpkin is still here, but the room is different. It's mine. My Brooklyn apartment hums, radiators ticking like crickets, the F train sighing somewhere under the block, November cold threading the edges of the window panes. I've got rosemary on the counter, butter softening in a bowl, a roasting pan throwing off garlic and lemon like a small, faithful son. Juniper, my gangly rescue with the anxious eyebrows, sits sentry by the stove, ears cocked in case anything edible hits the floor. There are votive candles lined up on the sill, stubby and honest. There's a playlist rolling in the background that sounds like fog and late buses, piano, a woman's low voice, a little Sinatra just because. My table is narrow and long, a flea market rescue with scorch marks someone once tried to sand away. I left them. They're part of the wood's story. I set it with mismatched plates, linen napkins I ironed because I wanted to, not because anyone would scold me if I didn't. A bowl of pomegranates. A small arrangement of eucalyptus and tiny oranges because Maya swears they smell like sun, and I wanted sun on the table. When I crack the oven to check the bird, a wave of heat comes out and fogs my glasses. I laugh to myself. The bird is bronzing just right. I baste and whisper, "Stay with me." And I swear it does. The buzzer goes. I wipe my hands and press the intercom. "Come up!" Footsteps on the stairs. The muddy thump of boots. The door swings and air rushes in. Wool, rain, perfume, the city. Maya first, cheeks pink, balancing a tart in one hand and a bouquet of paper white bulbs in the other. "For January," she says, handing me the bulbs. "Something that blooms when everything is rude." Perfect. I take them like a promise. Quinn arrives with a bottle and a sweater big enough to house a village, laughing already. Jorge and Eli together, arguing about which neighborhood currently has the best dumplings like it's a matter of national security. Aunt Rose, a little late as declared by the way her scarf trails like a comet. She brings deli flowers done all wrong, which is to say exactly right, pink and orange and loud. She kisses my forehead and whispers, "You look happy, like a blessing." Uncle Alan is right behind her with 2 pies and bakery boxes. "Insurance," he says gravely, eyes dancing. "In case the chef runs out of genius." And then David. My brother stands in the doorway, holding nothing but a small, unsure smile, hands jammed in his jacket pockets. He looks older by an inch and gentler by a mile. "Hey," he says. Hey, I say back. And it means 100 different things. And also one simple thing. You're here. Coats pile onto the armchair. Juniper inspects everyone and chooses to love Aunt Rose with immediate, undignified devotion. I put people to work, lightly. Jorge, glasses. Maya, can you rinse the salad greens? They're dramatic. Music swells and then softens. The kettle sighs. The apartment warms in that specific way where people do it to a space just by being inside it. We don't do a performance of gratitude, not the kind with turn-taking and side eyes. We set out bowls and spoons. We pass things as soon as someone asks. We eat in little waves, like the sea. Quinn tells a story about falling asleep on the wrong train and waking up at Coney Island with a gull eyeing their bagel. We groan and clap. Aunt Rose, mid-sip of wine, says, I once fainted in a Bloomingdale's dressing room, woke up famous for 7 minutes. Alan snorts so hard he coughs. Jorge uses both hands when he talks, always has, and knocks a fork clean off the table. He freezes, then looks at me, waiting for some invisible alarm to go off. I pick it up and shrug. Forks are survivors. He breathes again. I didn't realize until that second that a year ago I'd have stiffened too, listening for a rule. The rules here belong to no one but us. From the kitchen, the smell of sage. From outside, a siren smears by, then fades. I keep catching David's face across the table. He keeps catching mine. He's quieter than the others, but when he speaks, it glows. He tells Maya about the deli on his block that closes whenever the Mets lose. He's protecting his heart, David says about the owner, deadpan, and the table breaks into laughter that rounds the room. When the bird has rested and the gravy is just thick enough to feel smug about, we gather proper, plates freshly warmed by the oven, steam rising like little prayers. I stand behind my chair without meaning to. Everyone hushes in that human way, like you can feel when a moment wants room. I don't have a speech, I say, already giving one. I have a picture in my head. Last year, pumpkin pie on the table, and a sentence that felt like a floor dropping out. I said something I didn't know I could say. It was quiet after, in a way I had never trusted quiet before. And I look around at these faces, these good faces. I didn't know what would grow in that quiet. I thought maybe I'd planted nothing but distance. I take a breath, slow. The room waits with me. But look! I open a hand to the table. Look what grew. No one claps. No one needs to. There's a warmth that moves like a creature with soft feet, table to throat, throat to eyes. Alan lifts his glass. To kitchens where the good kind of quiet lives, he says. To doors you open for yourself, Maya adds. To Della flowers done all wrong, Aunt Rose throws in proudly. Laughter again, easy and clean. We eat. God, we eat. The turkey is somehow exactly what it should be, and the mashed potatoes taste like they remembered childhood better than I did. Someone finds the jar of cranberry relish and whispers, Hallelujah. Now there's a point where the conversation braids into 3 separate ropes. Work gossip, a heated ranking of pies, a debate about whether ghosts are just the echoes of choices, and I lean back and let the sound hold me up. My phone sits face down on the counter. It has been face down all night. I'm not ignoring anything. I'm choosing. Between sips of water, I can feel the shape of the old ache, like a healed bone that still reads the weather. But it's background now, like traffic. In the pause after seconds and before dessert, I slip into the kitchen to breathe. The sink runs hot and steams the window. And for a second the glass erases the city and gives me a simple frosted square. I draw a tiny heart in it with my knuckle before it disappears. My hands smell like lemon peel and pepper. I rest them on the edge of the counter and let the weight of this day land. I am not waiting for a text. I am not rehearsing an apology I don't owe. The line I said a year ago lives in me like a keel. It doesn't make a sound until you need it, and then it keeps you upright. David steps in, shoulder to the doorframe, half smile. "You did it," he says. "What?" "This." He nods at the table. The steam, the laughter that leaks around the corner like light under a door. "You built a different kind of holiday." I shrug, and my throat tightens anyway. "I had help." He looks down, then up. "I'm sorry I couldn't hear you sooner." I shake my head. "You hear me now?" Juniper noses David's hand and makes a small oof. He scratches her between the eyes like he's been doing it his whole life. We carry pies back to the table together, his hands steady, mine steady. Alan does the ceremonial first slice with exaggerated gravitas. Quinn pretends to object on behalf of tart rights. Someone starts humming a tune that might be a hymn if you didn't know us. Later, when the plates are an art project of crumbs and there's a trickle of port left in the glass, I light one more candle. It's small and blue and smells like fur. This one, I tell the table, is for what hurt and what healed. The flame catches and burns with an attention that feels like respect. No one asks me to explain. No one performs a moral. We sit with it. The night loosens. People gather their coats. There are those long doorway goodbyes New Yorkers do where no one wants to be the first to break the spell. Aunt Rose tucks a cookie in my pocket for later emergency. Kisses my cheek twice, both times loudly. "See you Tuesday," Maya sings. We're rescuing the paper whites from my cereal plant neglect. Jorge and Eli promise dumplings next week. Quinn threatens to kidnap the leftover gravy. Alan squeezes my shoulder and whispers, "Look how quiet can be kind." After the door shuts, the apartment holds a soft aftermath. The table looks like joy survived here. The candles are stubs and still working. The city murmurs through the window like a friend who can't sleep. I sit for a minute with my hands around a mug. Juniper sighs and drops her head on my foot. My body is tired in the way of good labor, the way of earned rooms. I blow out the last candle and watch the thin rope of smoke curl and vanish. In the dim, the scorch marks on the table look like constellations. I trace them idly, naming them with my own private names. The door, the keel, the quiet that stayed, pumpkin pie. The fork glinting under the dining room light, my mother's voice, bright and careful, saying I was a mistake, while the crust flaked and the nutmeg lifted off the plate like steam. I can still hear it, how the joke landed, how the giggles jittered around the table, how the room tried to swallow the cruelty like another sip of coffee. That sentence didn't end my life, it clarified it. If you've ever been told you are in error, here's the secret no one gives you with dessert. The only person who gets to decide your worth is you. People ask me what I felt in the silence after I said, "You never wanted to be my mother at all." I remember the confusion of sounds first, the soft clink of china, the heater humming, the chandelier buzzing, and then the quiet turned present, almost physical. It wrapped the table. It made the air honest. That line of mine wasn't a sword, it was a door. The room didn't collapse. The room revealed itself. Who stared down? Who looked up? Who blinked back tears? Who hid behind a napkin? When you tell the truth out loud, you don't need to scream. The truth sits down and everyone has to scoot their chair and make space for it. I didn't plan a mic drop. I don't even think I raised my voice. The words had been pressing against my ribs for years, and that night they stepped out into the light wearing my name. I stood, and my legs didn't shake.
I put my napkin next to the plate. I walked to my coat like the floor belonged to me. The night air was cold and sane. The sidewalk held. Somewhere on that quiet street in New Jersey, I realized I wasn't leaving the house in failure. I was leaving the role. You want to know what freedom sounds like? An elevator's soft ding at 2 a.m. A hotel room door clicking shut behind you while you exhale once, twice, a third time, and the breath finally goes all the way to the bottom of your lungs. It's the radiator hissing. It's the city outside your window insisting on itself. Sirens, tires, laughter you'll never have to interpret. In that small box of borrowed space, I sent one text that didn't apologize. I didn't justify. I didn't try to fix a person who never asked to be fixed. I told the truth and let it sit there like the moon sits, present, quiet, not asking permission to shine. Back in New York, the mornings became simpler. The kettle clicked off. The mug warmed my hands. I watched steam rise and thought, this is mine. My calendar had the same meetings. My neighborhood still smelled like bagels and bus breaks. But when I answered emails, when I stepped into rooms, I carried a different weight. Not the backpack of trying, not the armor of pleasing, but a tidy, manageable certainty. I'm not what someone says in a moment meant to keep me small. Freedom, at least the kind I mean, does not arrive with a parade. It shows up with a list. Here's mine. I stopped explaining my boundaries as though they were a problem to solve. I started saying, that doesn't work for me, and letting the silence do its work. I began measuring invitations against the cost to my spirit instead of the story I'd have to tell later to justify why I went. I learned that refusal can be kind, and that kindness to myself is not a betrayal of anyone else. You might be waiting for the perfect comeback. I get it. I used to practice them in the shower, editing each line until it gleamed. But the line that saved me wasn't clever, it was plain. You can spend a lifetime trying to win a game that only moves the goalposts when you score. Or you can step off the field. The powerful part isn't the sentence, it's the step. I carry small rituals now, anchors for the days when old echoes try to call me back. I keep a note in my phone that says, you do not have to explain. Another way, I keep a photo of my own table. Nothing fancy, just a thrifted vase and mismatched plates. And I look at it when I need to remember the difference between presentation and peace. I light a candle at night and tell myself out loud, we are safe. And I say we because there's a younger version of me who still glances toward the door, waiting for the test she didn't study for. I set down a plate for her, too. She eats first. Sometimes people hear my story and want a cleaner ending. They want my mother to learn, to apologize, to turn toward me with soft eyes and a steady voice. Maybe that will happen someday. Maybe it won't. My freedom can't be a hostage to her conversion. Growth isn't a courtroom where someone else has to agree with your verdict. It's a quiet apartment where you sleep through the night because you're no longer conducting a trial in your head. I won't pretend I never miss what I never got. There are mornings I wish for a simple text, proud of you. There are afternoons when a stranger's offhand comment skims too close and I feel the old reflex to shrink. On those days, I practice my line again, not as a performance, but as a boundary that fits in my mouth. You never wanted to be my mother at all. It's not an accusation anymore. It's a map. It tells me where not to go for water. If you're listening to me, and you're still at the table, your version of it, where the jokes are knives and the praise has a leash, I'm not here to hand you courage like a party favor. I'm here to remind you that courage grows in tiny, ordinary choices. You can start small.
You can say, "That doesn't work for me." You can leave early, you can book the hotel, you can sit in your car with the engine off and breathe 3 honest breaths. You can call the uncle who sees you. You can become your own witness. Here's what I wish someone had told me sooner. You are not disloyal for choosing the version of you that is alive. You are not cruel for refusing to carry another person's unhealed story. You are allowed to love people and leave the room when they hand you a script that erases you. Family isn't the room. Family is the people who let you keep your voice in it. So this is where I leave you tonight, with the simplest truth I have. Freedom isn't the cutting remark you wish you'd said. Freedom is the life you build, because you finally said the plain thing and then walked in the direction it pointed. Freedom is not loud. It's consistent. It's making dinner on a Tuesday and tasting your food and knowing it's good because you decided it was. It's buying your own flowers. It's answering your own phone. It's standing at your own window while the city keeps being the city and realizing the hum you hear is your life, not your alarm. If my story touched a sore place in you, you're not alone here. Tell me what the pumpkin pie was for you, the moment the mask slipped, the laugh that hurt, the line that told you the truth you'd been fearing. Share it in the comments if you can. Borrow my sentence if you need one to get started, or write your own. If you're not ready to speak it publicly, say it in a voice note to yourself. Say it to your reflection while the kettle sings. Say it to the air and let the room adjust. And if you need one more word from me, make it this. Enough. Enough trying to earn what should have been given freely. Enough waiting for someone else to bless your exit. Enough shrinking to fit a picture frame that leaves out your shoulders. You are not a mistake. You are the person who knows what a mistake is and refuses to live as one. Freedom is the reply. It's your reply now.